Hi guys, it is me, ChatterHD, and welcome to the Las Vegas Grand Prix of 2025. And it is race day in Vegas. And after what was a mental qualifying session yesterday in wet conditions that I certainly did not see coming. When I did my qualifying preview, I assumed, pretty much like everyone, that it was going to be a dry session. And then suddenly the downpour came. There was some rain in the area in the forecasting, a day or two before qualifying, but yeah, it was a real surprise that the rain came down, especially the way it did. It was very treacherous conditions, especially in the first part of qualifying in Vegas, but yeah, it was a great session. I managed to watch the session a few hours after it actually took place, and it has gave us a good mixed up grid for this race. We're going to get plenty of wheel-to-wheel racing and overtaking in this Las Vegas Grand Prix. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We've had that in the first couple races here in Vegas anyway. So yeah, it should be at least a decent race in terms of competitiveness, overtaking, and interesting stuff going on. Whether it'll be like a classic race or anything, who knows? Depends on what the weather does potentially. If we get some safety cars in there, who knows what could happen. But the grid, like I said, is at least mixed up for us, so that I think, are going to get quite a bit of overtaking for this Las Vegas Grand Prix. In terms of the weather forecast, there looks to be about a 30 to 40% chance of rain for the race. Most likely, it will be dry, this Las Vegas Grand Prix. But again, there is a decent chance we'll get, probably not the downpour we got yesterday, but maybe a couple showers. And on this track, given how cold and how slippery the surface is, if we get one small shower, even if it's 5 minutes long, the drivers will be in instantly for intermediate tyres, because the track is slippery enough in the dry. So it will be very interesting to see if we do get the odd shower, just how it affects things. But yeah, most likely it will be a dry race. But again, you just never know. We didn't think it would be a wet qualifying session really at all, but it ended up being the case. But yeah, looking forward to this race. It is currently just after 2 a.m. here in the UK. Of course, the race starting just under 2 hours from now at 4 a.m. UK time. So fingers crossed we do actually get a decent Grand Prix worth doing a stream at this time for. Because if we get a really boring, just, 2 or 3 out of 10 type race, then I am going to be very disappointed, put it that way. Because I am operating on not a lot of sleep, I'll put it that way. I did have a couple hours nap a few hours ago, which has made me feel a bit better. And I'm feeling better than I expected to feel at this point. But obviously this stream is probably going to go on for another 4 hours, so we'll see how I feel when we get to the end of the Grand Prix. But yeah, fingers crossed it's a Grand Prix worth staying up for. Of course, for you people in Asia, Australia, Oceania, this is a great timing, this Grand Prix for you for once. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. But yeah, this is the earliest F1 race in terms of a start time I think we've ever, or not ever had, but that I have ever had since I started watching Formula One back in the late part of 2011. Obviously, I've been watching the Australian Grand Prix, the Japanese Grand Prix, which has started at 6 a.m. here in the UK for many years, but 4 a.m. I don't think we've ever had a race starting quite that early. And I think in Formula One history, at least for the start time for us UK viewers, I think you'd have to go back to probably 20, 25 years ago, or maybe just under 20 years ago for the last time we had races starting around this time in the morning for us in the UK. Australia, the Australian Grand Prix used to take place earlier in the day, and then they moved to the later time of like 4 or 5 o'clock PM local time. I think that was 2009 when they started that. But before then, I think they used to start 2 or 3 hours earlier. So for us in the UK, probably would have been 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So that's how long it's been for us UK or European viewers for a race starting this early. But, we deserve to take this pain because so many around the world who love Formula One have to take this pain so regularly, especially during the European season. So, we deserve to take our share of that pain. But, yeah, we'll see how the Grand Prix goes. Hope you guys are well. Of course, this is my first and only watch-along of the weekend. Missed qualifying because, there was no way I was going to do both a quali and race watch-along given the timings of the sessions. Plus, I'm quite busy at the moment with very important uni work and all of that. But yeah, hope all you guys are doing well. And no matter what time zone you're in, what time it is in your part of the world, whether it's the middle of the night, it's the afternoon, it's, coming up late in the evening if you're, in North America, South America, hopefully you're all doing well and you'll all be joining me today in watching along this Las Vegas Grand Prix. A Grand Prix that is very important for the Drivers' Championship. The Drivers' Championship, remember, cannot be decided today. But it will, I think, quite possibly cement this Grand Prix who is going to win the Drivers' Championship. Most likely being Lando Norris in the McLaren. Very important Grand Prix this. But yeah, I hope you guys are well, and whatever is going on in your part of the world, whatever circumstances you're going through, I hope you're all doing as well as possible, and hope you're all good. Just another couple things before we get into the build-up to the race. Obviously, we'll go through the usual stuff, looking at yesterday's qualifying, go through the data to understand why the qualifying results ended up the way they did. Obviously, we'll go through race strategy as well for what it should be in dry conditions. A couple other things I just want to get into quickly is, firstly, I will be joined, I'm pretty sure, by Niblo, my co-commentator for this Grand Prix. Of course, he's not been able to join us for the last couple months because of the timings of the races and all of that. But yeah, he will be joining us in about an hour and 20 minutes from now. So about half an hour before the race starts. Obviously, this race starting at a great time for him, like 4 or 5 p.m., I think, in the afternoon for him. And yeah, we'll get his thoughts ahead of the race, and we'll have him on for the Grand Prix. And one more thing, of course, is that there is a poll running in the chat, and I want you guys to make sure you cast your vote in that poll. And the poll is the usual, asking you guys, who do you think will win today's Grand Prix? Will it be Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, George Russell, or Charles Leclerc? Who are those 4 drivers and the highest placed drivers for each team? Who do you think wins this Las Vegas Grand Prix? Last year, it was George Russell. The year before, it's Max Verstappen. Will we get another new winner here in Vegas? We will see in just under 2 hours' time whether we will or not. But like I said, we're going to go through the usual build-up, looking at what happened yesterday, and also getting into race strategy and all of that. Again, I am assuming, in terms of the predictions I'm going to make for today, and when I talk about strategy, I am assuming that today's race will be dry. The forecast is definitely drier than yesterday. There's a lot less rain around today in the Las Vegas area than there was yesterday. So if it's going to be dry, it really should be today rather than yesterday, if that makes any sense. So yeah, we'll get into race strategy and what certain teams can do to get themselves up the order and get themselves the results that they absolutely have to get in this Grand Prix. And then, obviously, I want to hear from you guys in the chat. What do you think will happen in this Grand Prix? And for the Drivers' Championship, what do you think the state of the championship will be at the end of this Grand Prix today? Let me know in the comments. And not the comments, let me know in, the live chat. And I will get to the best of your comments in a bit. Of course, make sure to smash the like button as usual on the stream. Anyway, let's get into what happened yesterday and why we've got the starting grid we've got. So we'll look at the results, obviously, to start with. Lando Norris on pole position. Lando, I will say, he did have a very good car for qualifying. The McLaren really handled the wet conditions very well, especially in the middle sector of the lap, which you'll see in a moment. The McLaren in the middle sector was absolutely brilliant. So he was helped to a degree by that. The McLaren, I think, a lot better around this circuit in wet conditions than it is in the dry. Lando, though, we have to give a lot of credit to him for what he did on that final Q3 lap, because he produced when it mattered. And it wasn't the best lap from Lando. It wasn't a faultless lap. He had quite a poor final sector. And like I said, the McLaren was really good in the wet conditions, and that definitely helped him. But at the end of the day, the biggest weakness that he had previously was delivering in the key moments, and he delivered in the key moment of qualifying, and that's why he is on pole position. A bit of a higher position, maybe than you could, you'd say that maybe McLaren deserved to be in terms of the true pace or, true performance of their car. Max Verstappen in second. Verstappen performing well, getting onto the front row, doing the best he could. I don't think pole position ever looked really that likely for Max. I mean, in the dry, I don't think Red Bull had really that fast of a car in qualifying trim. So I think they'll be very happy that they've got a car on the front row. And they obviously can challenge for the race win. But I don't think pole position, like I said, was ever really likely for Verstappen. But still, great driving from Max. And just behind, what a performance by Carlos Sainz, who clearly loves this Las Vegas circuit. Third in the Williams. Obviously, he was second in qualifying here in 2023, despite his 10th-place penalty. Last year, started on the front row, finished in third. And here in the Williams, quite a bit of a slower car, qualifying up in third place. And Carlos Sainz, given how quick Williams tend to be in a race situation, I think Carlos Sainz is a genuine contender to finish on the podium today. I'm not saying he will finish on the podium, but I definitely could see it happen. Today. I think as long as he doesn't get swamped at the start or get racing the other cars behind him. If he can just get away in third place and keep it clean, keep it comfortable, and just get away smoothly and get his race going and immediately get up to a good pace, I can see him hanging on to that position for at least a while, even if he doesn't finish on the podium. The pace is good in that Williams car in race situations. We know that. They're not going to be fighting, obviously, for the race win. But like I said, with the position he's in and the pace the Williams car has, I think definitely a podium is possible today. And honestly, I hope he does get a podium because it'd be great to see Williams on the podium yet again in 2025. George Russell in fourth. Russell had some issues in qualifying. He complained of his steering wheel getting heavy sometime during the session. So, despite that issue, still doing a decent job. Mercedes will be very disappointed, though. Coming out of practice on Thursday, they looked like they had arguably the fastest car. But in the wet, they just did not replicate at all the type of speed they look to have in the dry. So, yeah, disappointing in the end. Not the end of the world. I mean, Russell in fourth, he could easily still finish the podium. If Russell gets a very good start, maybe even can fight for the race win. But I think after Thursday practice, I think Mercedes were really hoping to have at least a couple cars, or not at least a couple cars, they only have two cars. I think they were hoping to have their two cars in at least like the top four on the grid because their car genuinely looked that quick. But fourth and 17th it is for the Silver Arrows. Oscar Piastri fifth. In the end, it fell apart for Piastri, but it wasn't his fault. Charles Leclerc went off the track midway through the lap on that final run in Q3, caused the yellow flag. Piastri had to back off, and yeah, that completely destroyed any chance he had of being at least on the front row, and he did have a decent chance of possibly taking pole position, because remember, on that final run, if he had not been impeded by Leclerc going off and the yellow flag, Piastri would have completed his final lap after Lando had done the lap that, had put him on pole. So, with the track improving all the time, pace-wise, Piastri definitely could have got pole yesterday, but it wasn't to be, and fifth it is. And it's a real shame for Piastri that he's fifth, because in dry conditions, I don't think Oscar has anywhere near the pace really to be fighting with his teammate. But if he had managed to get pole yesterday, or even put on the front row, he could have wrestled still a decent result out of this Grand Prix weekend. But he failed to capitalise on, what, let's say, the better pace he had in qualifying yesterday in wet conditions. But like I said, failed to capitalise for a reason that was nothing to do with him. It was not his fault. It was just bad timing. So, a shame for Piastri. And he has a world of work to do today, if that makes any sense. Obviously, 24 points behind his teammate Lando Norris coming into this Grand Prix, with only 3 races to go and 1 sprint to go as well. The sprint, of course, is next weekend in Qatar, and races are quickly running out for Piastri to be able to keep the championship alive. And I would be surprised if Lando finishes the race. I'd be surprised if Oscar ended up finishing really that close to him, because I think, again, in dry conditions, I think Lando has probably about 2 to 3 tenths of a second per lap in his pocket over Oscar around this circuit in racing conditions. So yeah, Piastri not in a great position, and gonna be a tough race, because that McLaren as well, we have to remember, in dry conditions around this circuit, is probably not the fastest car. So if Piastri finishes on the podium, it's going to have to be some drive, because that car is not exactly the clear fastest car over the rest of the field. In 6th place, Liam Lawson, a driver that I think is pretty much surely guaranteed that he will be on the grid next season, because he continues to put in brilliant performances. Obviously, so brilliantly finished 7th in Brazil 2 weeks ago. And now he's 6th on the grid here in Vegas. Absolutely brilliant. And I hope for his sake he does finish in the points today. He's been great all weekend, just like his teammate Hadjar as well. Let's remember him. Both Racing Bulls drivers have been great. But yeah, Lawson, absolutely superb. And I think Lawson definitely will finish in the points today. And like I said, at this point, I think Lawson is going to be on the grid next season because he's got right into, I think, his best form. The form that really Red Bull were hoping for when he joined them. Of course, the Red Bull car a lot more difficult to drive than the Racing Bulls car, but yeah, Lawson doing fantastic at the minute. Fernando Alonso in 7th. In changeable conditions, Alonso always seems to be in there, doesn't he? Brilliant from Alonso to get 7th on the grid. Quite a bit higher of a grid position than I think Aston Martin really deserved. I don't think in dry conditions they had a fast enough car to be really anywhere near 7th place. I think maybe they had a fast enough car to be maybe P10, maybe P9 you could argue, but 7th is, yeah, quite a bit higher than I think what they deserve. Alonso, though, we know his race pace is fantastic, and Aston Martin a bit stronger in race situations than Racing Bulls are in terms of speed. So Alonso's put himself in a good position, I think, for the race today to pick up a few points, a few crucial points for Aston Martin if they're going to finish in a decent position in the Constructors' Championship. Isaac Hadjar 8th. Hadjar will be disappointed to be 8th, half a second behind his teammate, because obviously this season he's been so regularly ahead of Lawson. And if he had been ahead of Lawson by the usual, say, couple tenths of a second, which he usually is ahead of Lawson, then he would have been 5th on the grid, Hadjar. So it shows you the potential, I think, that Racing Bulls car, possibly had yesterday. Racing Bulls were pretty quick, but overall not quite as quick as, say, Williams were. But yeah, still a great performance from Racing Bulls. 6th and 8th on the grid, quite a bit better than we were expecting. After Thursday practice, I thought they would get both cars in the top 10, but I didn't think they'd be having a car in the top 6 on the grid. Absolutely no way. And then Charles Leclerc 9th and Pierre Gasly, massive shout out to him, P10. Gasly is a superstar around this circuit. Remember, he was 3rd on the grid here last year for Alpine. Unfortunately, was never able to realise a potential great result because I think he had some sort of reliability issue. But Gasly, in what is still not a great car at all, especially in that midfield pack, doing wonders with that car. So congratulations to him being in the top 10. And if he can finish in the top 10 today, then that would be an amazing result for Gasly. Leclerc 9th, though, really disappointing from Ferrari. Their pace in the wet conditions was just not anywhere near what their pace and grip levels are like in the dry comparatively, against the other teams. How many times did we see Leclerc in the final sector especially go deep and lock, the brakes going into that final chicane? So many times. The Ferrari, especially under braking, was really poor yesterday. I don't think Leclerc really had any confidence on the brakes in qualifying, and I think that was the big difference in the end for why Ferrari was so poor. Lewis Hamilton, of course, knocked out in Q1. That wasn't entirely down to Hamilton being poor, but I think the Ferrari car being very tricky to drive in what was quite wet conditions did not help whatsoever. But Ferrari will be praying that it is dry today, because if it is, they've got a fast enough car to be, I think, easily in the top 5. And if there is a well-timed safety car, they could absolutely fight for the podium. The car is quick enough to be on the podium, but the problem is they've not got the grid position. Ninth at best is, even though Leclerc will make his way past Hadjar, Alonso, Lawson in relatively easy fashion, he's giving the others, his competitors, a bit of a head start, and that really could cost him and be the difference between him finishing 5th or 6th or, possibly on the podium. So, yeah, that's disappointing for Leclerc. But, we'll see what he can do today. We know he's great around this circuit, and we know the Ferrari car as well is pretty quick around this track in dry conditions. So if it is dry, don't count the Ferrari team out. They definitely can play a big role in this Grand Prix. And like I said, well-timed safety car between lap, say, 20 and 30. Maybe if Ferrari, if it really favours them, that could put them right in a position to fight for, the podium. Maybe even the race win. Depends on how it all shakes out. But yeah, keep your eye on Leclerc today. I think he's going to be a real big mover up the field, and pace-wise, I think he'll be pretty quick as well. And then the rest of the field, Hulkenberg 11th. Hulkenberg did the best he could. The Sauber is decently quick, but it just wasn't fast enough to be in the top 10. Stroll 12th. Stroll doing the best he really could. I don't think he was too bad yesterday, but I was amused by Stroll's performance because through Q1 and the early part of Q2, he was really quick, and I was thinking, here we go again. He's turned into Ayrton Senna, the thing he does once a year, where he magically becomes one of the greatest of all time, seemingly. Something that he did back in Turkey a few years ago. But it didn't pay off in the end. I think what cost Stroll really was going onto the intermediate tyres too early, clearly. I think if he had stayed out on the wet tyres, I think Stroll probably would have made Q3, and who knows, probably would have ended up on the 4th row of the grid with his teammate. So, cost by his team a bit, but yeah. I did find that amusing because obviously when normal service is resumed, in dry conditions, Stroll would be, 15th or 16th at best. 13th and 14th, the two Haas cars, Ocon and Behrman. As predicted, Haas are nowhere near as quick this weekend as they have been in the previous couple weekends. This track is just not suiting their car. I don't know if it's a tyre temperature issue or what, or potentially because of how long the straights are here, that could be hurting them as well. We do know that the Haas car is still a bit draggy in a straight line, so I don't think that's helping either. But yeah, this is an off weekend for Haas. Saying that, they are still in a decent position, 13th and 14th. I mean, they could still score a point or two from there. But yeah, I don't think they're going to have quite the pace they had a couple of weeks ago in Brazil, put it that way. And then you got Franco Colapinto, 15th. Not too bad from Colapinto. Alex Albon, 16th. Albon obviously crashed at the end of Q1. Poor again from Albon, being out-qualified yet again by Carlos Sainz in these last few races. And in general, in qualifying, as of late, Albon has been pretty poor, I must say. Antonelli, 17th. I was so disappointed when Antonelli was knocked out in Q1 because if you watched my qualifying preview, you would have seen that I predicted Antonelli to take pole position for this race. Obviously, that was based on if it was a dry session. But even in the wet, I think Antonelli, if he had got through to Q3, I think Antonelli could have qualified 3rd or 4th, which would have been still a pretty decent result and would have put him in a good position to fight for maybe the race win today, because he has looked faster than Russell this weekend in the dry, up until obviously qualifying where it was, massively different conditions. So, a shame, but it will be very interesting to see Antonelli come through the field. And again, like I said with Leclerc, if there's a well-timed safety car, keep your eye on Antonelli, because that Mercedes car, with him in it, it's pretty quick in the dry. Bortoletto 18th. Bortoletto, I must say, last couple of races, he's been quite a bit off the pace. That could be, though, explained by him not having raced around these last couple circuits of Interlagos and Vegas, so maybe that lack of experience is the reason. And then the final two cars, Yuki Tsunoda in the Red Bull and Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari, last of all. How the mighty have fallen. For Hamilton, though, it wasn't entirely his fault. He did have some bad luck with, I think, certain yellow flags at times. But, I mean, we could see it when we saw his car in Q1. The car was very hard to drive. And definitely was not complying with Hamilton. And I don't think that helped whatsoever. And we'll see in this race today what Hamilton can do. Hamilton, by the way, will be starting one position higher on the grid in 19th because Red Bull have decided to start Tsunoda from the pit lane and completely change his car. I'm surprised that Ferrari are not doing the same with Hamilton, because what do you have to lose? The only thing, though, saying that is, with a decent chance of rain, maybe that is the only reason why Ferrari have decided not to start Hamilton from the pit lane. Because if Hamilton, let's say, puts on a dry setup and it's a really good setup, if it then rains for half the race, then he's going to be nowhere. So that might be why they're doing that. But I think if the forecast was bone dry, I'm pretty confident Ferrari would start it from the pit lane and just optimize the car to overtake, and trim the wings out and whatever. So ultimately, we'll see what Hamilton can do, but that Ferrari car is not giving him a lot of grip. And Hamilton, of course, confidence-wise, he is completely shot at the minute. His confidence is in the toilet, pretty much. His season has only got worse. The results, the pace, it's got worse as the season has gone on. So I'm not expecting anything really from Lewis Hamilton today, which is maybe the best thing for him in this Grand Prix. But those are the results of qualifying. Let's get into the sector times just to understand why it ended the way it did. And especially looking at Lando Norris, let's have a look at his sector times. And yeah, the first sector, very strong compared to the rest of the field. 3.5 tenths quicker than Mercedes and Ferrari, and about half a second quicker than Red Bull. You can see Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, Williams, they were all pretty much bang on the same pace in the first sector, but Norris was just on a different level, and that McLaren especially, on a different level in the, in the first sector. The McLaren obviously has quite a sharp front end, which, as I said in my qualifying preview, one of the things you really do need around here is a really good front end, and the McLaren has the best front end of any team. And that really helped them, especially in the first two sectors. As you'll see here with the middle sector time, half a second Norris was quicker than the next car, being Verstappen, and then 7 tenths quicker than Aston Martin, Racing Bulls, Williams, and Mercedes and Ferrari were over a second off the pace in the middle sector alone through qualifying. And that is ultimately what the difference was between McLaren and the rest, is again, the grip difference in that first and middle sector. In the final sector, it was all over the place. It was anyone's game, which is why I like the final sector of this circuit, because it doesn't matter how good your car is. It's kind of luck of the draw as to whereabouts you end up through that final sector. But the first two sectors, McLaren way quicker than everybody else. Mercedes and Ferrari, I must say, really way too far off the pace in the middle sector. And that's really not entirely for Ferrari why they were slow yesterday, but for Mercedes, that's pretty much the only part of the lap where they were, seriously lacking in qualifying. If they were on the same pace as Red Bull in the middle sector, then Russell probably would have been on the front row of the grid. So, that's the difference between a much better qualifying than what Russell ended up having. And then the final sector, like I said, it's all over the place. Williams the fastest, just ahead of Mercedes, and then Racing Bulls, Red Bull. McLaren, you can see, 0.3 off the pace in the final sector. And yeah, Lando Norris's final sector at the end of qualifying yesterday was not very good at all. Yet he was still on pole by, 3.5 because those first two sectors were just so dominant. He didn't need to have a great final sector because he was already miles ahead of the rest of the field. So yeah, McLaren, able to get away with that in qualifying, but in the race, if it's dry, which at the minute, I just looked at the Sky F1 coverage, which has just begun, looks like it's dry at the moment, that will come back to bite them in the race today, because we know McLaren have a car that is, one of the slowest in a straight line. So in the final sector, they should be one of the slowest teams. And if anyone today gets within a second of a McLaren, they are going to be right on their gearbox, even if they don't necessarily have a faster car for the lap overall. So, if Lando, starting on pole, if he can sprint away early on and build a gap, then I'd be very impressed. Because, remember, DRS is enabled after the first lap, so Lando's going to have some first lap and a half to be able to sprint away and avoid the car behind having DRS on him. And for Oscar Piastri, that hurts him even more, because Piastri's kind of, I wouldn't say middle of the pack, but sorry there, just had to clear my throat. Piastri, I wouldn't say he's middle of the pack, but he's in a position in 5th place where even if he has a good start, he's not going to be able to break free of the cars behind. So he's going to have to really be on it, Piastri, at the start and in the first few laps. Because if he's not, he'll get really caught up in a lot of wheel-to-wheel battling with slower cars and will be in quite a bit of trouble. So that is a very interesting thing to look out for regarding McLaren. And that's why, really, I hope it's dry today, because I think, with McLaren, and especially the Drivers' Championship, I think that'll make things a lot more interesting today if McLaren are a bit more on the back foot compared to what they were like in qualifying. Obviously, in the wet, we could have a crazy race still, but I think, wet or dry, I think we could get, some real surprises in this Grand Prix. But, for the final sector, the only other thing is look at the pace of Leclerc in the Ferrari. A second off the pace of Williams and Mercedes. And like I said, how many times did you see Leclerc in that final chicane locking his brakes and going deep? That's what caused this really poor final sector pace. And simply not good enough if you're Ferrari. If they had been, say, right on the pace of Sainz and Russell in the final sector, so basically a second quicker, then looking back at these results, they would have been, Leclerc would have been 5th on the grid, which is still not great, but, it's a lot better than obviously 9th, and it would have put Leclerc in a position to still comfortably fight for a podium. So it just shows you how much that final sector cost Ferrari dearly. Not just on one lap, but repeatedly, making it a lot more difficult than it really needed to be yesterday. So, yeah, Ferrari, like I said, they will be praying it's dry. If it's wet, I think Ferrari will be just mired in a midfield battle because the car just doesn't have the grip to be anywhere near those front running teams. But in the dry, like I said, I think the car is easily quick enough to be on the podium. But again, Leclerc's poor grid position puts him in a difficult spot, which is what's going to make the race, obviously, quite interesting today. Well, that's the sector time data. In terms of going into this race, who has the best pace and who doesn't, the pace difference between the front four teams is really close. Even George Russell, after qualifying, I heard him say pretty much the same. He said that it's, give or take, pretty much everyone in that, that top tier is pretty much on the same pace. In dry conditions. In the wet, McLaren are the best team, no doubt about that. We've seen that all season. In the wet, McLaren's car is like a spaceship compared to the rest of the field. So if it does rain today properly, McLaren will win the race today by a country mile. But if it is a proper dry race, no rain at all, then it's anyone's game. It really, really is. I think in dry conditions, the fastest car, I think because McLaren look after their tyres so well, you'd probably have to say McLaren will still have the absolute outright fastest car, but I think it'll only be by a tenth of a second at most over the next best team. The next best team, I think, will probably be Mercedes and probably say Red Bull I say Mercedes and Red Bull be on pretty much identical pace. And then Ferrari, I think, also will be on almost the same pace in free air. I think those three teams, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, are pretty much all within, say, half a tenth, maybe a tenth at most of each other. But again, because they're able to look after their tyres the best out of the front four teams, I think overall, you'd have to say McLaren have the fastest car for the race today. But again, only by maybe a few hundredths of a second. So, the front four teams in dry conditions, in clear air, I reckon are only covered by at most 0.2 of a second, which is what's going to make today's race, I think, very, very exciting. After that, Williams, I think, clearly are the fastest midfield team. And then sixth, I would probably go, I think today, Aston Martin, because, like I said, Racing Bulls, who we know, always very quick in qualifying. There does tend to be a drop-off in the race with them. So, I think Aston Martin probably sixth, Racing Bulls seventh, Sauber eighth, and then probably Alpine ninth and Haas, you'd have to say, going into the race, look like they have the slowest car. Saying that, 13th and 14th is not bad if you've got the slowest car in dry conditions, but that's how it looks to me to be. With Williams, though, do not, again, count them out. Even though I think they're the fifth fastest team, and I think in clear air, all things being fair, I think they are slower than the front four teams. I don't think the pace difference is going to be that much. I think they'll only be probably a couple tenths of a second a lap slower than the front four teams. So, they're not going to be losing that much time, and that's why they'll be right in the fight for the podium, because they've got the advantage of very good track position, especially compared to the Ferrari cars, the Mercedes to a degree. So, that's what puts Williams, I think, in a good position for this race today. And yeah, just looking at the Sky F1 coverage, and yeah, I can confirm that even though it's cold by the looks of it, it is still dry. Anyway, based off of all of that, let's get into my predictions for the race today. And again, these predictions are based on if it is a dry race. Please remember that. And of course, I've gone with my predicted gaps, which I think it will be throughout the whole of the top 10. And with all things being equal, pretty much, there can only be surely one winner, Max Verstappen. That's who I think wins the Las Vegas Grand Prix today. Lando Norris, though, I think will finish in second. A couple seconds ahead of George Russell third. Carlos Sainz will be nearly 10 seconds behind in fourth, which is not a massive amount of time. Fifth, I'm going Charles Leclerc, fifth, ahead of Oscar Piastri. That is probably a surprise prediction for some people, but two reasons I've gone for that. One, Leclerc right now is in much better form than Piastri. There's no doubt about that. And because Piastri is the slower McLaren by probably a couple tenths of a second, maybe 3/10 of a second per lap, that puts him in a bit of a vulnerable spot to Leclerc, who will be on, I wouldn't say quite maybe the leader's pace, but close to it. So I think Leclerc finishes in fifth, Piastri in sixth. Piastri, though, will be right there with Sainz and Leclerc fighting for those positions. It'll be a very close battle in the closing stages of the race. Seventh, I'm going Kimi Antonelli. I think he'll just about finish ahead of Alonso, Lawson, and Hadjar, who I think will round out the top 10. But again, with Leclerc and Antonelli, if we get a safety car at the right time, keep your eye out for them. I think for Leclerc, if we get a safety car midway through, I think Leclerc very much could finish in, say, third or even second place. The race win, probably a stretch too far, but a podium definitely possible if he gets a bit of luck with a safety car. For Antonelli, I think if there's a safety car at the right if there's a safety car at the right time, I think a podium is still probably a bit too far, but I think a top 5 finish becomes absolutely possible if we get a well-timed safety car for Antonelli. But ultimately, we'll see. We have had, or did we have a safety car last year? I don't know that we did have a safety car at this Grand Prix last year. We did in 2023. We had at least a couple. Obviously, the first lap is when you would expect most likely there to be a safety car because, the track is very slippery, tight in the first few corners. So, yeah, that's when you would expect possibly something to occur, but ultimately we'll see. If this result, though, was to happen, Max Verstappen would cut the championship lead down between himself and the leader, Lando Norris, down to 42 points, which, would be a decent gain, and it would keep Verstappen in the championship fight going into the next Grand Prix in Qatar, but it would still be very unlikely that he would win the championship if, he wins and Norris finishes in second. But if Norris does finish in second and Piastri finishes sixth, of course, that's a gain of 10 points for Norris, meaning that Lando would go into the Qatar Grand Prix 34 points clear of Oscar Piastri. And I think that would mean that if that was the case, Lando would have to make sure he wasn't outscored by Piastri by any more than, 8 or 9 points in Qatar, and he would be the world champion. So if he can, gain that amount of points on Piastri today, then that is pretty much game, set, and match for the Drivers' Championship. But we'll see if that does happen. And also, if Alonso finishes 8th and Racing Bulls finish 9th and 10th, it would be obviously important points for them. Racing Bulls would score 3 points, but Aston Martin would score 4. So Aston Martin would keep themselves, I think, just about within 10 points of Racing Bulls going into the final couple races, if, of course, this result I predicted does come off. But we'll see whether it does ultimately or not. But guys, that's my prediction for the race. Let me know yours in the live chat, and we'll make sure to get to your comments very soon. Of course, there's a poll running in the chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think is going to win the race today? Let me know in that poll between now and a few minutes before the race starting who you think will win today's Grand Prix, and I'll make sure to read out the results of the poll right before we get into the race. But I'm going to just quickly think or get the timer back up on the screen, and then we're going to go through race strategy. So there you go. We've got just over an hour to go until the race starts in Vegas. Again, make sure to smash a like button. As usual, to help the channel in the algorithm. And if you do enjoy the content, then yeah, hitting the like button is the best way of showing me that you enjoy the content itself. But yeah, keep your comments coming, because I will get to the best ones in probably the next 10 minutes or so. Yeah, keep those comments coming. Anyway, we are going to go through now race strategy. And let me just quickly find. There you go. So, according to Pirelli, the best strategy for today, surprise, surprise, is a one-stop strategy where you start on the medium, pit at around lap 20. Remember, it's a 50-lap race, which, if there's no safety car, it can be a very quick race, probably only an hour and 20 minutes at most. But yeah, if you start on the medium, then pit around lap 20, which is a few laps before half distance, and then you go into a set of hard tyres to finish the Grand Prix. There are, though, other options. There are 3 two-stop options, which, might be possible today. One of them is starting on the medium, pitting on lap 12, then going on to a set of hard tyres, and then pitting again, probably just after half distance, and then finishing the race on another set of hard tyres. The second two-stop option is starting on the medium, going until about lap 15, then going on to a set of hard tyres, and then pitting just after lap 30 to finish the race on mediums. Or a crazy option is to start on the soft compound tyre, which would be very good on the first lap or two, given the cold track temperature. But after that, I'm not sure how great it would be. But yeah, the third two-stop option is start on the soft tyre, pit on lap 8, which is very early, go on to a set of mediums, do a 20-lap or 25-lap stint, something like that, on the medium, and then finish the race on another set of soft compound tyres. I do not see anyone doing that strategy, because I think it's very high risk of getting caught up in too much traffic and ultimately having a race fall apart. But because this circuit, it is definitely possible to overtake. It is, I think, one of the easier tracks to overtake because of that very long back straight, and you have the straight leading on to the start-finish line, which is another great opportunity to pass. A two-stop strategy is possible here, because the thing normally that prevents you from doing an extra pit stop is traffic. And it's not that, traffic is an issue if you can overtake it, but if we're at certain tracks where you get caught up behind another car and you can't overtake, then that's what costs you being able to do an extra pit stop compared to others and make it work. And that's why a lot of the time you see teams doing the least amount of pit stops they can to for a Grand Prix. For example, in Brazil, the reason we had a two-stop strategy is because in Brazil, it is quite easy to overtake. There's, lots of opportunities to overtake. So getting held up behind traffic is not really a thing at Interlagos. So that's why doing at least 2 pit stops is able to succeed. And you can make it work because that traffic issue isn't really an issue at all. But here in Vegas, we have to remember, even though we have a very long back straight, and it is definitely a bit easier than most tracks to overtake here, it is still a street circuit, and it is still in areas very close and tight, and you can lose still quite a bit of time. Let's go through, though, the front 4 teams and what strategy options they all have. So for Lando Norris, I think he's just going to go for the predicted strategy. I think, where he finishes, I don't think depends on his race strategy. I think he, as long as, if he's in the lead and he's only a couple seconds or so ahead of whoever's in second, as long as he covers off the car behind and makes sure to keep ahead and no undercut is performed where McLaren lose out, then they should be fine. I don't think there's any need with Lando Norris to do anything different, pitting a bit earlier or going a bit longer before pitting, unless, of course, the cars behind are going longer as well. So Norris, I'm expecting to do the typical strategy. I think we'll probably start the medium and pit around lap 20 and then finish the race on the hard tyres. For Oscar Piastri, though, McLaren will be desperate to at least get him on the podium. And the only way to do that is to get Piastri to go longer into the race on his set of tyres. How long, though, will he need to go to be able to have a chance? Because I think if you look at Piastri's pace in the dry around this circuit, I don't think it's good enough to where Oscar can just naturally overtake the cars ahead and get onto the podium. He's going to need help on the strategy to get himself up the field if he can. Lando Norris pitting on lap 20. I think Piastri is going to have to probably go until the half distance mark, lap 25, before pitting to have a chance at, on fresher tyres, be able to do something and fight for a podium. The thing with Piastri, though, I think the thing that is kind of playing into his favour is because he's in 5th and the midfield is only right behind him, as long as he, by, say, lap 20, has built a big enough gap to the midfield, then he can afford to go an extra 5 or even 10 laps longer than, say, Norris and Verstappen and Russell, to make sure he then has good, fresh, quick tyres for that final 20 laps or so of the race. I think Piastri, if he's going to run longer into the race, I think the thing is, it depends where Lando Norris comes out from his pit stop when Lando pits. Presumably, Lando will pit first before Oscar because, they're kind of in 2 different races. Lando on pole, Piastri in 5th, and by the time we get to lap 20, I think Piastri is probably going to be at least 5 seconds behind his teammate. So I think if Lando, let's say, pits on lap 20, Lando will probably come out about, 15 seconds at most behind Piastri. And then obviously we'll very quickly start catching Piastri. But I think with McLaren, they won't want to keep Oscar out too long to the point where he loses too much time to Lando and is unable to be at least close-ish to Lando at the end of the race. So I think lap 25 is when Oscar Piastri will pit. Probably going from medium to hard tyres. And what it will mean, let me just clear my throat before I say what I'm going to say next. What it will mean if, say, Norris, Verstappen, and Russell pit on lap 20 is Piastri should have around 5 lap fresher tyres. And with that, that's probably his best hope of finishing on the podium. If they can run him a bit longer without losing too much lap time, then go for it. But that's all they can do because Piastri on his own, as I said, he doesn't have the pace to finish on the podium on his own. He's going to need help by the strategy team. For Red Bull, same really as what I said for Lando with Max. As long as they cover off the cars either behind or ahead and pit on the, say, normal pit lap that it's predicted is, for the best strategy, then I think that's absolutely fine. I think Max can win the race today without any funky stuff on the strategy. I don't think he needs to go and do like an undercut by a few laps or anything like that. Maybe undercuts Norris maybe by just a single lap to get ahead. Maybe that'll happen. But I think Max can naturally win the race today without any help on strategy. So as long as Red Bull just do the best strategy for the race, they should be fine. And leave it down to Max Verstappen to work his magic, which I'm sure he will. For Mercedes, very interesting, I think, Grand Prix ahead for the Mercedes team because obviously 2 cars in wildly different spots, and the fastest, I think, Mercedes back in 17th on the grid. For George Russell, I think a lot of what he does on strategy depends on what his start is like. If he's behind Carlos Sainz, then I think he's probably going to end up just doing the normal pit strategy, to be honest. Pitting, around lap 20 and then going until the end of the race. That's most likely, I think, what Russell is going to do to just try and get ahead of Sainz, get onto the podium, and then probably try and hold it from there. But if Russell gets ahead of Sainz on the first lap and can keep up to a degree with Norris and Verstappen and keep them within 3 or 4 seconds, I think we could see Mercedes try something different. Maybe running a bit longer, maybe pitting a couple laps sooner, to properly get themselves into that, to that battle for the win. Because I think Mercedes can win today, but it just depends on where they're at the end of the first lap. If they were on pole, like they were last year, I think there's a pretty good chance they would win the race today. But because they're 4th on the grid at best, they're going to have a really good start to the race and look, pretty menacing in those early laps to really get themselves in that fight for the win. So if Russell gets ahead of Sainz on the first lap, gets himself up to 3rd, and like I said, keeps Norris and Verstappen, say, no more than 5 seconds ahead of him, then if Russell does decide to go a few laps longer, say until lap 25, let's say like Piastri does, with a few laps fresher tyres, George Russell, second half of the race, keep your eye on him. He might be able to come back at Max and Lando and might be able to possibly win the race. Obviously did it last year. Mercedes were incredibly quick at this Grand Prix last year. Qualifying, obviously, they were fast. They got pole position, but in the race, they were clearly miles quicker than everybody else. Um, so we'll see ultimately what happens today. But again, all comes down, I think, for Russell to the start. And if we're going to get a three-way fight for the win, Russell needs to get ahead of Carlos Sainz, I think, to possibly create that opportunity. For Antonelli in 17th, I would say with him start on the hard compound tyre, which I think Mercedes very likely will do because they do tend to split strategy with their cars in terms of who starts on whatever tyre compound. The issue is, though, with doing that is Antonelli, we must remember, he's never raced around here. He's young and inexperienced, and on a cold, slippery circuit into that first few corners, those hard tyres are not going to be very safe, I would say, to keep it on track and keep a decent speed. After a couple laps or so, the hard tyres should be fine. But can can Antonelli survive potential trouble, contact and crashes with others, being on those cold tyres, which puts him at, in a vulnerable spot? Can he avoid that trouble to then, get on with it and get his way through the field? It's a risk maybe worth taking, or start him on the soft compound tyre and you try that way to get himself up the order. At least on the soft compound tyre, you won't have to worry about being on cold tyres and being at risk of being swamped by others. And maybe Antonelli can climb a few positions just on the first lap or two on a bit or on the soft tyres, which obviously fire up quicker than the other compounds. So, ultimately we'll see. I think Mercedes are probably going to start Antonelli on the hard tyre because I think it's probably the best thing to do. And they'll just hope that Antonelli can get through those first couple laps without any incidents. If he can, and Antonelli is, say, in the grid position that he's starting from, which is 17th, then we'll see what he can do. If he starts on the hard tyre, really, he should go at least 30 laps into the race. Maybe even longer than that, maybe lap 35 before he makes his pit stop. If he does go 30 laps into the race, and let's say there's no safety car in the race, and let's say Max Verstappen, for example, is the race leader. If Max pits on lap 20, which, again, most people should pit either on or around, that particular lap. If Max pits on that lap, he'll probably come out around about where Antonelli is, because Antonelli, he's not going to be that slow. Remember, the Mercedes car in clear air is probably just as quick as the Red Bull around this circuit. But obviously Antonelli will lose time in the traffic and all of that. So if Antonelli can keep himself inside the pit window of, say, Verstappen and Norris, and then Verstappen and Norris pit, come out, maybe a couple seconds or so behind Antonelli, then, Verstappen and Norris will then probably overtake Antonelli pretty quickly on fresher tyres. And then, if Antonelli can go until, say, lap 30 and can keep himself ahead on track of his teammate and Leclerc and Piastri and Sainz, and once he pits for fresh tyres, maybe he can finish in the top 6 if he's really quick at the end. I think Antonelli, though, is going to absolutely need a safety car mid-race to get himself in the top 5, because I just don't see him having anywhere near enough pace, starting from 17th, to be able to, to really get into that podium fight. So yeah, ultimately we'll see. But I think 6th or 7th is the absolute best that Antonelli can do today. Such a shame, because I genuinely thought after Thursday practice that this could be the weekend where Antonelli takes his first Grand Prix win. But after that qualifying result, it's very, very, very unlikely to happen. And finally, with Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton starting pretty much last. If I was Ferrari, I would just start him on the soft compound tyre. And actually, if I was Ferrari, I would put him. And actually, I would put both Ferrari cars on a two-stop strategy today for two reasons. One, Lewis Hamilton, I mean, he's starting last. There is absolutely nothing to lose with, him going for a two-stop strategy. If you start on the soft compound tyre, it'll give him an advantage at the, first couple laps or so on warmer tyres. Maybe gets himself up a few positions. Remember, the Ferrari car is very quick down the straight, so he'll be able to utilise that to get himself up a few positions. And then, pits early, undercuts some cars, gets up into the top 10. Has a bit of fun with the race rather than just touring around in the back of the hard tyres and hoping that everyone ahead pits before he does. The reason with Leclerc I'd go for a two-stop strategy is not only because they don't really have anything to lose, but a two-stop strategy here in Vegas is viable. It is, if you go for it, you can make it work. Ferrari especially, though, I think are more likely to make it work for a couple reasons. One, they have the best straight line speed of any car, so overtaking should be the easiest for them because of that. Down the back straight, they should, have a whale of a time, really. But also, the Ferrari car tends to wear its tyres out the quickest out of the front four teams. So instead of running long into the race and going until lap 25 or lap 30 before you pit, why not just go for it and do a two-stop and just allow Leclerc to drive the wheels off the thing and absolutely go for it? If let's say Leclerc starts on, I mean, they've got, in terms of choice for what tyres they start on, because it was wet yesterday, they've got plenty of tyres available, so that's not an issue at all. For Leclerc, if you start on the medium and pit him around lap 15 at the latest, and then put him on another set of mediums, then, you can undercut probably a few cars ahead. And especially, let's say if Piastri does go till lap 25 or so, or even Russell does as well, then they could undercut their way past those cars. And then once they pit again for another set of fresh tyres, then, they'll be on once again fresh tyres for that final 20 laps or so. So, yeah, why not? Just go for it. I don't see, Ferrari are not going to win the race today unless they get very lucky. They're not going to win the race today. It's not going to happen. So, go for a two-stop strategy, push like crazy, and we'll see what happens. Who knows? Maybe it'll work. Maybe they'll get onto the podium, which would be a great result from where they are on the grid. But I don't see what there is to lose by going for that strategy. Again, this is one of the easier tracks to overtake, so a two-stop should be more viable here than it would be in, say, Baku, where even though there you've got a long straight, you have a lot of slow corners before that long straight. When here in Vegas, it's a bit more free-flowing than what you've got in Baku. So yeah, strategy-wise, that's what I would do for those certain teams. We'll see what they decide to do. I think it's certain that Piastri goes a bit longer with his tyres. Antonelli and Hamilton probably as well if they do decide to start on the medium or the hard tyre. I think it's certain with them that they go a bit longer. But I think what I'm most hoping for is that George Russell gets up at least to third on the first lap. Because if he can, and that Mercedes car can lap at about the same speed as the Red Bull and the McLaren, then I think we've got a proper three-way fight for the win. And Russell is absolutely capable of taking on and beating Verstappen and Norris for this race today. No doubt about it. But guys, we have only got 44 minutes to go until the race begins. This stream so far is absolutely flown by. I am, for the next 15 minutes or so, going to read out the best of your comments in the chat. Make sure to keep them coming. And then, soon, in about 15 minutes, I will bring Niblo on, who of course will be my co-commentator for today, and we'll get his thoughts ahead of this Grand Prix. Quickly, before I go any further, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new, because for the final couple races, obviously we'll be doing watch-alongs for the important sessions. But in terms of next year, of course, we'll be doing plenty of qualifying and race watch-alongs and reviews, previews, all of that stuff. For 2026, a new era in Formula One. Cannot wait to get into that next year. So make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe right there. Also, like I said, make sure to smash the like button. We're currently on 22 likes. Let's try and get up to 30 plus likes if we can in the next few minutes. That'd be great if we could do that. anyway, I'm going to read out the best of your comments for a few minutes, and then we'll bring Nib on. Hello to Yanni. Hello to all of you, by the way. Paul James Squibbs saying morning all. And yeah, no matter what time it is, I know I can see a couple of you Aussies in the chat. Of course, this is a brilliant time for you guys. But good to see some Europeans as well. And I'm sure we've got some American and North American peeps in the chat as well. Right, let me go through this chat and we'll go through some of your best comments. Hello to Brabham, by the way, as well. There's Hey Chaz and Change. Listening to stream while driving. No answering the poll as Oscar wasn't an option. Yeah. It's just not very likely, unfortunately, that Oscar is going to win. If Oscar had not been held up on that final lap, I think he'd be definitely a proper contender to win today. But the chance of victory, the small chance of victory he had this weekend, went up in smoke pretty much on that final lap yesterday in qualifying. Let me find. Let me just scroll down quickly. Hello to Laurie Rastogi. He says, Chazza, I thought you were worried about your sleeping pattern. Well, that's why I'm only doing a race stream. That's why I didn't do a qualifying stream yesterday, to protect my sleeping pattern to a degree, even though kind of going to be ruined for today, because obviously once I've done this stream and all, I'll be basically going straight to sleep and then be sleeping all day, but I should be able to correct that in a couple of days or so. But doing two streams back to back at this time of the night is brutal. Yeah, with the stuff I've got going on with uni and that, it was just no way that I was going to do both a quali and race stream. But for you guys that do enjoy me doing both a quali and race stream, one thing I can announce is that next weekend, of course, is the Qatar Grand Prix, and I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch along next weekend. So make sure to join me for that. And in terms of the timings, I'll be live at 4:30 p.m. UK time next Saturday for qualifying, and then I'll be live at 2 p.m. UK time on next Sunday for the race. A race that is very likely to decide officially who wins the championship. So yeah, make sure to join me for that next weekend in Qatar. Of course, this is the beginning of the final triple header of the season, this Grand Prix. And in just 2 weeks from now, it's the final race. It is that close to the end of the season. This second half of the season is absolutely whizzed by. It felt like, the summer break ending only felt like 3 or 4 weeks ago, really, to me. But it was actually, in reality, 3 months ago. It's just crazy how many, races have just gone, just like that. Been definitely a better second, or better, this half of the season than the first half of the season. Bit more competitiveness. Bit more shared out. The race wins between different teams, which has been better. But this season, I to a degree, I've enjoyed this season, but it's definitely not been the best season we've had in that we've covered here on the channel. Absolutely no way. But it's definitely not been the worst. It's been, I wouldn't say an average season. I think that's probably a bit harsh. I'd probably give this season like a 6.5 out of 10. Definitely could have been a lot better. Obviously, we had a lot of hope coming into this season, especially with Ferrari, that they were going to be right there fighting for wins. And if Ferrari had actually turned up this season, I think we would have had a really classic 2025. But, it's turned out the way it's turned out. And that's just the way it is. As, by the way, I'm just looking at the track currently, and we've got Lando Norris out on the track. He's doing his laps on the way to the grid, just getting a feel for the circuit. And yeah, the track is bone dry, and it doesn't look like anyone in the grandstand is, getting any raincoats ready or anything. So looks like it is going to remain dry. Laura says, I could be wrong, but I do think Piastri will finish ahead of Sainz. I know Piastri is struggling, but the McLaren is infinitely superior to the Williams. I wouldn't say infinitely superior this weekend. I wouldn't go that far. But we have to remember again, yes, the McLaren is quicker than the Williams, but Piastri is not the quickest McLaren. And Piastri is definitely not getting the most out of that McLaren car at the minute. Which is why I've got Sainz ahead of him. For this race, we have to remember that. If Piastri was, right there, quicker, or the same pace as Norris, then yeah, Piastri would be beating Sainz today, no doubt about it. But the Oscar Piastri we're seeing at the minute is not the same Oscar Piastri we saw a few months ago. Brabham says Max and Lando take each other out and the championship will be well and truly back on. Absolutely. If that did happen, then Piastri would most likely be on the podium, I think, at that point. And yeah, they're back down to 8 or 9 points or something like that. And it could happen. You never know. And remember, it is possible that the championship could swing once more. Back in 2007, Kimi Räikkönen was almost officially out of the championship battle going into the final 2 races of 2007. And then Raikkonen won the final 2 races, which was 20 points overall. Hamilton only scored 2 points, and Raikkonen ended up winning the championship by a single point. So it is possible. It is obviously very unlikely. Formula One is not as dramatic these days as it used to be. Back then, the late 2000s were a very dramatic time for Formula One. But it's possible. So that's why we can't sit here and say, oh, it's all over. Championship is won. I think after today, very much Lando will have, I think it's possible Lando will have one very firm hand on the championship trophy after today. But again, it is still possible for a swing, one last swing in the championship. Right. Let me see if I can find any other comments. Crystal saying Piastri will leave McLaren after 2026. No way he can be satisfied after with this. Thing is, Piastri signed a new contract, didn't he, a few months ago? So I think he's with McLaren for at least another couple years. So if he's not happy with the situation, he's gonna have to lump it and learn to live with it, I'm afraid. But yeah, I think Piastri. I think with the certain disagreements we've seen between Piastri and the team and Norris, I think this last couple months is the very start of Oscar's departure from McLaren, which, again, probably won't happen for another 2 or 3 years. By the way, good to see Astro here. Yanni says, what if Lando gets a DNF? Of course, massively changes things. If Lando doesn't finish the race and Max Verstappen wins, the gap between Verstappen and Norris would go down to 24 points. And let's say Piastri finishes third. If Norris doesn't finish, then the gap would be 9 points between Norris and Piastri. So there'd only be 24 points separating the top 3 in the championship if, say, Norris had a DNF today and Max won and Oscar finished in third. Which I think, even though I'm not biased against anyone, that would be an ideal outcome today to really close up and spice up the championship for these final 3 races. But, it's possible, but again, unlikely. Right. Let me just check one thing quickly. Right. Well, we'll give him a bit of time, but one thing. What was I going to say? Yeah. Unfortunately, doesn't appear like my co-commentator, hopefully for today, Niblo. I don't think he's actually awake at the minute. He did tell me that he was going to have a bit of sleep before the race because he was up earlier. Obviously, he's pretty used to being awake on European time because obviously he follows a lot of our sports here in Europe. Obviously, he's a massive Liverpool fan. But yeah, it doesn't look like he's online at the moment, so we'll give him another few minutes, see what happens with that. But yeah, I'll just keep reading out some more comments. He walks says, Chazza, welcome back. How you doing, you beautiful professional bastard? I'm doing fine. I can't remember the last time you were in the chat. Yeah, I must be a year or 2 since you were last in the chat. I don't think you were. I don't think I've seen you in the chat this year. But obviously last year my content got a bit mixed up in the like early to mid part because I was having some issues. But yeah, good to see you. Hopefully you are well. Let me just read out this prediction by Astro, who says he thinks, or well, I think he hopes it will be Piastri winning from Russell, Sainz, Alonso, Leclerc, and then Antonelli, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, and Ocon. That would certainly be an incredible race if that result did transpire. One thing I am going to do quickly is just post a link of the stream out one final time, and then we'll go through some more of your comments. So just give me a second, guys. Come join us here to watch along a critical race in Las Vegas. And there you go. So hopefully we get some more people hopping on. Brabham saying McLaren have no interest in Piastri winning at all. For example, they didn't even bother challenging the penalty from last race. You think if that was Lando's penalty, they wouldn't challenge it? I agree. We've all known, and we've just avoided talking about it for a while because it's, kind of like saying the quiet part out loud. But I think a lot of people are still uncomfortable to talk about. I wouldn't say I'm uncomfortable to talk about it because I'm not, I haven't got any skin in the game. But Lando is McLaren's boy. That is his team. Whether people like it or not, that's the truth. He came through their academy. He's been with the team since he started in Formula One. He's been with the team now, 6 years? He's their guy. He is their guy. And no matter who his teammate is, Lando will be the star boy for McLaren. End of. And that's why for Piastri, him winning the championship this year was so important for his standing within McLaren. And that's why it's, in terms of his career at McLaren, career defining, that it's, slipped away from him. Well, I wouldn't say slipped away from him, but he's slipped really at the crucial moment, I would say, Piastri. But yeah, I think, it's something, again, McLaren being Lando's team, it's something we all know, but it just doesn't get talked about enough because, again, it's saying the uncomfortable truth that people don't want to touch on. Brabham saying, I think Oscar just needs to go to another team and get it built around him. Aston Martin, I'm thinking, will be a good fit. Possibly, depends on how competitive they are. Also, you got Audi, remember? Who knows where they'll be? I know they've got very high ambitions. That could be a potential. But one team that I think is, a potential destination is Ferrari, especially with, Lewis Hamilton, surely in the last year or two of his career. And then you got Leclerc, who looks even more likely as time goes on that he's going to leave Ferrari probably the end of 2026. So I think that's a very possible destination. Even though, with the way Ferrari are, not sure that that will get Piastri closer to winning a championship going to the Scuderia. But if that's his only option to leave McLaren, then that's what he's got to do. Let me just see if Nib is online, and no, still isn't. So we'll give him still a bit more time. We've still got another 25 minutes to go until the race gets underway. So if he doesn't come online in the next, say, 10-15 minutes, I'll try and message him, So he maybe, hops on right as we get going. Ewok says, I've been dying. I hope that's not true. Let me just get rid of these annoying bots. Even at this time of the morning or night, they don't stop. They don't rest. Let me see if I can find some other comments here. Astro said, enjoyed this season with Oscar winning, but baffled and saddened that he suddenly seems to have lost his pace. Doesn't add up for me. The Oscar that won at Spa was the real Oscar. I know, and I mean, it is easy to sit here and go with the conspiracy theory argument that McLaren have sabotaged his car because they want Lando desperately to win the championship. I don't think that's the case. I think it's pretty simple, actually. And I talked about it, I think, in my last podcast that I did a couple of weeks ago, that when it's going wrong for you and when the momentum is against you, that's really when you are tested as, a driver and as especially a sportsman or sportswoman, whatever you want to call it. That really shows who the absolute best are from, the not so great, because the absolute best, when things go wrong or the momentum goes against them, they very quickly turn it back in their favor. Oscar Piastri allowed the momentum to shift against him and has simply failed to swing it back in his direction. And because of that and the continued poor results, his confidence has got worse, and we all know that, when it's really is obvious when a driver doesn't have the 100% confidence in what they're doing. We've seen it before with other drivers. I mean, look at Sebastian Vettel in his final 2 or 3 years or so. That was not the real Sebastian Vettel because he had lost that absolute confidence he had in his prime. And with Piastri, had that weekend in Baku where he was absolutely terrible. Norris didn't capitalise on it. Then in Singapore, Piastri out-qualified Norris, had a good chance to race Lando, get a good podium finish. But then Lando did what he did at the start, got ahead of Piastri. It miffed Piastri big time, and then Oscar has just been unable to, to swim against that tide. It's a shame because I was really enjoying his performances in the first half of the season. Like you said, that performance at Spa was, fantastic. The overtake, some of the overtakes he's done this season have been absolutely brilliant. But again, that's the true test of how great a driver is when it's not going right for you. How do you respond? And Piastri has not responded really at all well to that momentum shift. And that is unfortunately why it has, from his perspective, unfortunately, why it swung in Norris's favour. The thing is, though, Lando Norris at the minute is performing very well, is doing exactly what he needs to do to win the championship. Norris also, though, if the momentum was to swing against him, I don't think Norris is really any better than Piastri at being able to turn the tide of momentum, when things are going wrong. Of course, eventually at some point, Piastri will get back into form. This is not going to just go on forever. But, the only hope Piastri has is if something happens to Lando, a DNF, or if Lando just suddenly makes a big mistake that completely swings the momentum back towards Piastri. That's the only way Oscar wins the championship somehow from here. But if Norris just keeps doing what he's been doing these last, 2, 3, 4 races, then, Lando Norris will be the world champion for 2025, quite simply. Let me just get rid of some of these bots. There you go. Let me see if I can find some other good comments here, and I'll see if I can maybe wake Nib up. What do you call it? Sarah Gara saying, I think 3 years ago Chaz made a video about how Norris is like the Chris Jensen Button or something like that. Yeah, I did make a video. It was about 3.5 years ago. It was about a year before McLaren became a front-running team. About a few months before Piastri joined the team. And I would still stick by that, because what I said in that video was that Lando Norris will only be a world champion if the car is fast, if the car is the fastest car. But, he'll, in terms of, how he's compared against the other great drivers on the grid, he'll always be viewed as probably the, fourth or fifth best driver at best on the grid, and not quite on the same level as the absolute best. Same with Jensen Button, in how, Jensen in the mid-2000s was really good, but he was not on the same level as Michael Schumacher, Kimi Räikkönen, Fernando Alonso. And you could argue, you could probably throw Montoya maybe in there as well if you're talking about raw pace. And then later on in, the early 2010s, Jensen was probably about the fourth, fifth best driver on the grid. But then again, you had Alonso, Hamilton, Vettel, and you could, in terms of, again, raw pace, you could probably say Mark Webber were ahead of him. That's what Lando Norris is. He's always going to be about the fourth or fifth best driver in Formula One. And if he ever wins the championship, it will be because he had the fastest car. I will give credit to Lando. He's really turned it round in the championship this year. And if he does win the championship, then, he will definitely deserve it more than Piastri, because when it's really mattered, Norris has performed and Piastri hasn't. But again, just because he's won the championship, or he hasn't won the championship, but, if he wins the championship, it does not at all make him the best driver on the grid. In the same way that, Jensen Button in 2009 was brilliant, but even though he won that championship, Jensen was still not the best driver in Formula One at the time. The best driver in Formula One at that time was either probably Lewis Hamilton or Fernando Alonso. So, I think it's a very fair comparison. And if he does have a career like Jensen Button, wins the championship, I think he's already, Lando, pretty close to Jensen's race win tally. Probably will end up with a few more race wins than Jensen had. If he ends up with one world championship and 20 odd race wins, that's a great career. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. If every driver had a career like Jensen Button, they would have at least have had a great Formula One career. Of course, everyone gets caught up in, being, like Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher, where you end up winning, 7 or 8 world championships, but you don't have to win multiple championships to have a great career in Formula One. That's just, a fact. Vettel Hamilton says, I'm going to say that the way how Oliver Behrman is performing, he is similar to Sebastian Vettel. And Ollie said Vettel was the main reason he wants to drive at Ferrari. Yeah, I think Behrman has come out and said that he was or is still kind of a Vettel fan, which would make sense to a degree. Because remember, Behrman was born in 2005, so if he started watching Formula One about 10 years ago, or just over 10 years ago, that was when Vettel was at Ferrari, still pretty much in his prime. So, would make sense. I wouldn't say Behrman is like Sebastian Vettel as a driver. I'm not sure really who I would compare Behrman to. I haven't seen enough of him to come up with a viable comparison. The closest driver on the grid to Sebastian Vettel for me is George Russell. He's very similar to Vettel. Consistently very quick in qualifying. When he leads a race, he's very efficient at, pulling away and leading comfortably. But also isn't the greatest in wheel-to-wheel combat like Vettel. Vettel was good, but Vettel wasn't, he wasn't on the same level as Hamilton or Alonso. Same way that Russell is, I'd say, he can be good in wheel-to-wheel combat, but he's not as good as, say, Verstappen or Leclerc or Alonso, drivers like that. Behrman is German, right? No, he is, thankfully, he's British. Another British driver. And hopefully, from his point of view, he'll be the next British driver in the, for Ferrari in the long history of, British drivers that have raced for Ferrari. All the way, going all the way back to, what was it, Mike Hawthorne, Peter Collins, Sterling Moss, obviously Nigel Mansell, and obviously at the moment, Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, Behrman looks like he could very well be the next driver on the grid that, very well likely could be in that Ferrari. Chris was saying a bit like a certain Finn being the best on the grid between 03 and 06 despite not winning a title. Exactly. Yeah. The thing is, I've said this so many times before, and it is so true. People, again, get caught up in who the best driver is, and, it's a great debate. Comparing who's better in qualifying, who's better at this, who's better than that. Again, I do enjoy the debate, but it's a bit irrelevant because it doesn't actually matter that much, I would say. Because ultimately, and I think this season really has proved what I'm about to say is true, you don't have to be the best driver on the grid to win a world championship. You just need to be good enough in the fastest car to win the championship. Obviously, depends on how fast your car is compared to the rest of the field. But, that McLaren has been clearly the fastest car this season. And Lando, over the course of the season, has been fast enough and good enough to where he's probably just about going to get the job done. And that, again, that's all you need to do if you're going to win championships. Again, you don't have to be the best driver on the grid to be a world champion. There's drivers who've won more than one world championship in the past who were not the best driver in Formula One. Nelson Piquet, back in the 80s, for example. I don't think Piquet, during maybe in his first title winning year, but after that first title winning year, which was 1981, after then, I don't think he was the best driver on the grid, yet he still won another 2 championships, could have won a a fourth one in 1986. So it's about being good enough in the right team, in the right car, at the right time, and executing when you get your chance. That's that's what matters. Kind of like in football, a great example is Steven Gerrard at Liverpool. Steven Gerrard was easily a good enough player to be like to have won probably 5 or 6 Premier League titles. Obviously ended up winning 0, mainly because the team he played for just never really had a good enough team to win, except for that 1 year where he slipped. But he was easily good enough to win titles, but he just never had. He was never. That Liverpool team was never good enough at the right time to actually win. If Steven Gerrard was 15 years younger, then obviously he would have played during the more recent Liverpool era, and he would have ended up probably winning 2 or 3 titles at least. So that's what I mean. It's about being good enough or great enough at the right time, in the right team, in the right situation. You don't always. Not every sport is about who the absolute best is, like, say, tennis, where, it's about whether you're the best or not, regardless of anything else, really. Not every sport, unfortunately, is like that. And that's just the way it is. I will quickly send him a message. And we'll see if he wakes up in time. But we've got 8 minutes to go until the race begins. So if the race begins and he's still not on, then I will just do the race watch along solo. It's going to be quite funny if he doesn't make it, because, again, it's such a good time for him and horrible time for me. He should be, here, obviously, raring to go. But like I said, he follows sports here in Europe in terms of when he's awake. So he's pretty much on my sleep schedule. But right, let's read out a final couple comments, and then I think we'll finish the poll and then get into this Grand Prix. Astro saying 1982 was a very weird year in F1 history. Very sad one too. Was that the year of the Villeneuve and Pironi story? I think it was. I watched that documentary. If you haven't seen it, guys, make sure to go and watch the documentary about Gilles Villeneuve and Didier Pironi. I watched it the other week. It is really good. I did not expect it to be as good as it was. It was a really good documentary. Told the story really well of the friendship between the two, and then how, what happened that season unfolded, and the tragedy that unfolded from that season on for both. It was such a good documentary. Yeah, that early 80s period was very weird period. The quality of the grid it wasn't weak, but at the very top end, it wasn't as good as it was later in the 80s, where you had, Senna, Prost, eventually got to his best, Mansell, PK at his best, and, drivers like that. It was very competitive. You had, PK, Prost, Alan Jones, Reutemann, Lauda came back in. You had John Watson. John Watson nearly won a championship. It was that competitive back then. Obviously, Keke Rosberg, Pironi, Villeneuve. It was, again, a very weird but also mental time in Formula One. But anyway, before we go any further, let me finish up this poll in the chat where I asked you guys, who do you think will win the Las Vegas Grand Prix? Just under 200 votes. Thank you for voting if you have. And 55% of you have voted for Max Verstappen as most likely to win the race today. And I agree. I think he will win the race today. 34% for Lando Norris, 7% for Leclerc, and 4% for Russell. So more of you think Leclerc is going to win from 9th and Russell in 4th. That's a bit surprising, but there you go. But yeah, thank you guys for voting, and we'll see, ultimately, what goes down in Vegas, as we're just 4 minutes away from the beginning of action. Quickly, though, let's get into a couple things before lights out. Firstly, the championship standings. Lando Norris, the championship leader, is 24 points clear of Oscar Piastri coming into this Grand Prix. Max Verstappen in 3rd is 49 points behind. Verstappen could be out of contention officially from the World Championship by the end of this Grand Prix. Depends on where he finishes. If he finishes behind Lando Norris, then he's out of the championship fight, pretty much. George Russell then in 4th, Leclerc 5th, Hamilton 6th, Antonelli 7th, Albon 8th, Hülkenberg 9th, and Hadjar in 10th. On the constructors' side, McLaren, of course, the champions. Mercedes in 2nd, Red Bull only 4 points clear of Ferrari in the battle for 3rd. And then you got Williams in 5th, Racing Bulls in 6th, 10 points clear of Aston Martin, Haas right behind Aston Martin, and then Sauber in 9th, and Alpine last. Let's get into those. Some key stats regarding the front-running teams coming to this Grand Prix. McLaren, of course, have never won the Las Vegas Grand Prix. They have, though, won the last 2 races and 2 of the last 5 in general. Last year, though, they were 6th and 7th in this race. They were absolutely nowhere in this Grand Prix a year ago. Surely, they'll be a lot better today. Red Bull, of course, have won this Grand Prix 2 years ago. Max Verstappen, still don't know how they did pull it off a couple years ago. And they've had a pretty good record as of late. They won 3 of the last 6 races. Last year, though, it was only 5th and 10th in the race. Of course, a year ago, Verstappen won his 4th World Championship. Not going to be celebrating today in terms of a championship, but can he celebrate a race win? We'll see. Ferrari have also somehow never won the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and their last win in Formula One was 13 months ago in Mexico City. Last year, it was 3rd and 4th in the race. If they were to finish there today, they'd be very happy with that. And for Mercedes, they won last year's Grand Prix. Mercedes have 2 race wins in 2025, and last year, 1st and 2nd it was here. Can they somehow win the Grand Prix today? But let's go through your starting grid for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. On the front row, Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. On the second row, the front row from last year in the roles reversed, Carlos Sainz in 3rd and George Russell in 4th. 5th and 6th from Oceania, Oscar Piastri in 5th, and the Kiwi, Liam Lawson in 6th. 4th row, Fernando Alonso and Isaac Hadjar. Completing the top 10 good friends, Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly. That was actually the second row of the grid of this Grand Prix last year. 11th and 12th, Hülkenberg and Stroll. The 2 Haases, 13th and 14th. 15th and 16th, ex-teammates from last year, Colapinto and Albon. Penultimate row, the 2 F2 drivers from this time last year, Kimi Antonelli and Gabriel Bortoleto. And then starting 19th, Lewis Hamilton, and starting from the pit lane, Yuki Tsunoda. But here we go. It is time for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. The tie blankets are just about coming off. On the left-hand side, by the way, I put everyone starting on the medium, but I don't actually know that officially yet, that everyone is starting on the medium. But most cars should be on the medium compound tyre. But we will find out officially in a moment. And I'm just looking. So all of the top 10 are on the medium. Hulkenberg in 11th is on the hard compound tyres. The formation lap begins right now. And Lando Norris pulls away. This will be a bit of a long formation lap. Because, of course, it is one of the longer laps on the calendar. So, yeah, Nico Hulkenberg is starting on the hard tyre in 11th. Colapinto and Albon are on the hard compound tyre. And then Antonelli is on the soft tyre. So Mercedes are not going to risk starting on the hard. They're going to go for it at the start, which is good to see. And then Bortoleto and Hamilton are on the hard compound tyres. So a few hard tyre runners, most people on the mediums, and one driver on the soft, which is Antonelli. So Lando Norris has already completed the first half of the formation lap as they swing down onto the final corner before the long back straight. This is where actually Lando Norris spun and crashed out a couple years ago when he was fighting in the midfield. Yeah, McLaren not only have not won this Grand Prix, they've not even finished on the podium in the first two Las Vegas Grand Prix. This has not been a good Grand Prix for them. Been probably, you'd say, the weakest race for them in the last couple years. As it's just showing on screen that Las Vegas is the longest race distance on the calendar, 192 miles of racing that we're going to be doing in the next, or in the 50 laps. As almost the entire field on that back straight, the first 5 cars just pulling through the chicane and onto the, what is basically the pit straight. And here comes Lando Norris. Weaving, warming the tyres, doing the burnouts, everything you need to do. It's a very, very short run into turn 1. But we have seen from a couple years ago, Max Verstappen, who I remember starting on the front row, him making a move into the first corner. So it is possible, if you're starting second, to overtake for the lead. But again, very short run into turn 1. As well, one thing I do like at the start here on the starting grid is that the grid is curved. It reminds me, and it hopefully will remind some of you older F1 fans, of the old grid at Spa before they made the pit straight. It's a nice throwback to how things used to be. As Tsunoda is just pulling to the inside at the back. And remember, Tsunoda on the medium tyre, he will be starting from the pit lane. Red Bull have basically completely changed his car. As the last couple cars line up. And we are about ready for racing in Vegas. Lando Norris has got one hand on the championship trophy. Can he take another big step towards the championship? 3 lights, 4, 5 lights. And it's away we go in Vegas. Lando Norris gets a good start and very aggressively comes over and pushes Verstappen off. But he goes off himself, does Norris, and Verstappen comes back on and gets the lead. Lando was way too aggressive, forgot his braking point, went too deep, and he's now lost the lead. He's going to lose second place. There's a yellow flag for something at the start that's gone away now. But Russell has gone up to second. Disaster from Lando Norris. That was absolutely terrible, quite frankly. Like I said, he was very aggressive, covering Verstappen off, but then forgot about his braking point. Clearly forgot how short of a run it is into turn 1. And then Max took the lead as Piastri has not had a good start. He's behind both Racing Bull cars. Yeah, it looks like Sainz is in 4th, and then I think Piastri is in 7th place. As Alonso's not had a good start either. One of the Haases has had a great start. I think there's a Haas up in 8th place, I think. As they now enter the back straight for the first time, and it is Verstappen leading from Russell, Norris, Sainz, Hadjar up to 5th, and then Lawson, Piastri. Behrman has gone from 14th to 8th. What a start. As in the background, Leclerc dives down the inside of Alonso. Leclerc up to 9th. And then it's Alonso, Hulkenberg, and then Ocon as Marshall's running away. Double waved yellows into turn 1, but they've gone away now. As, oh no, there's some debris on the outside of turn 3 there. As Gasly has dropped way down the field. I think Gasly might be the driver that's had some contact and suffered, as we're on lap 2. As Tsunoda pits immediately to get rid of his medium tyres. And Bortoletto has pitted as well. So, outside of the top 10, it's Hulkenberg, Ocon, Lewis Hamilton. What a start he's at. 19th he started. He's up to 13th. As, I think a Racing Bulls car there. He's hit the wall. It's Liam Lawson. I don't know if he had contact with someone. I don't think he did. I briefly looked away, and Lawson has got, I think, a puncture. And I'm pretty sure he's hit the wall somewhere. Liam Lawson has thrown away a big result. What a disaster. Especially when Racing Bulls desperately need the points. As we've got a virtual safety car. No surprise, now we've got quite a bit of debris on the racetrack. But yeah, Lawson, I'm pretty sure he's hit the wall somewhere in the middle sector. And now the top 10. Verstappen, Russell, Norris, Sainz, Hadjar, Piastri, Behrman, Leclerc, Alonso, and Hulkenberg. As Lance Stroll is out of this race. I don't know if... I was going to say, I don't know if he started the race. He clearly did. I could see him there on the start. But yeah, he clearly had contact with someone. And yeah, Norris replayed the start. He came across, covered Max off, but he forgot about his braking point. And then Max smartly just ducked underneath and got him back. In the background, someone got spun round at the first corner. I don't know who it was. And then Russell had the momentum around the outside at turn 3. And then had the better straight line speed. Got the move done. Here's a replay. And Norris did the right thing to cover Max off, but just forgot about the braking point and went deep, and it was lucky he didn't go into the barriers. Remember, the wrong, cold tyres, cold brakes, all of that. And then, yeah, had no momentum going through turn 3. Here's a replay from Bortoletto. He's on board. And it's going to be him, isn't it? Yeah. Into the side of Stroll and Gasly. That is such a stupid mistake from Bortoletto. He's dive-bombed half the field at turn 1 and luckily hasn't wiped out even more cars. As there you go. So Lawson bumped Piastri out of the way at turn 1. So I think that's a slow tyre failure that's happened there. Slow puncture. Because very hefty contact he made there. Right front tyre to Piastri's left front. So I think that's what's happened there. And then, yeah, Stroll, rear wing fell apart from the contact. So, bit of chaos there. But yeah, Lance Stroll is out of this race. Which, nothing you could do. Bortoletto, absolutely psychotic move at the first corner. That's when on lap 4. As Piastri and Lawson under investigation. I'm probably be for Lawson causing a collision. It's the virtual safety car is about to end. And there you go. It does end. We're back underway, and the current top 10 is Verstappen, leading from Russell, and then Norris, Sainz, Hadjar, Piastri, Behrman, Leclerc, Alonso, and Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg, the only runner in the top 10, not on the medium tyre, is on the hard tyre, so we'll keep an eye on Hulkenberg's progress on that compound. And then it's Ocon, Hamilton in 11th and 12th, and then you've got Albon up to 13th, Colapinto 14th, Antonelli in 15th. Antonelli is pitted, so he's got rid of that soft tyre, crucially, so Antonelli doesn't have to use... because he's already used 2 different compounds, he can just, his next pit stop can be on another set of hard tyres if he wants to. That's crucial for him. Tsunoda 16th, and then Gasly, Lawson, Bortoletto, and like I said, Stroll is out of this race. Can George Russell hang on to Max Verstappen? The gap is 1.3 seconds. As they're on the long back straight, they've got DRS. Some of the cars. Hadjar has got a very skinny rear wing. That Racing Bulls. There's Leclerc right on the back of Behrman. That Ferrari looking nice and racy. And he'll be past Behrman, I'm sure, on the next lap or so. As we're on lap 5. Verstappen leading by about a second as Russell a bit quicker in the second half of that restart lap. As it stands, though, if it finishes this way for the championship, Verstappen will close the gap to 39 points to Lando Norris. Piastri will be, 31 points behind Norris. So Verstappen, for his championship, looking good at the minute, but still a long way to go. Who knows what's going to happen in this Grand Prix. But one thing I want to do is just correct who's on what tyre compound. So, yeah, Hulkenberg in 10th on the hard compound tyre. And then everyone from Lewis Hamilton in 12th down is on the hard tyre. A lot of drivers pitting early to get rid of the medium or soft or whatever tyre they were on, as Leclerc is about to pass Behrman, as Russell now within a second of Verstappen had got DRS into the chicane, only 7/10 of a second separating the two, as Leclerc goes up the inside of Behrman into the chicane. Behrman lets him go, no point fighting it. Leclerc is in a much faster car. As we begin lap 6. So Leclerc is up to 7th. Leclerc is only about a couple seconds behind Piastri, so it's worked out decently so far for Leclerc. But here's George Russell, just 6/10 behind Verstappen, and that Mercedes looks clearly faster than the Red Bull, and in dry conditions, that Mercedes looking just as quick as it was a year ago here in Sin City. As Alonso now right up behind Behrman. Is Alonso going to try and pass Behrman into turn 4? No. But this is the main battle to look at. Verstappen versus Russell. The 2 best drivers in Formula 1 right now are about to do battle for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. As Lando Norris in 3rd, must say, being dropped. Lando is just over 3 seconds off the lead. So, yeah, Lando not having a great time. As down the back straight, Russell's got the DRS. He's closing on Verstappen. Not close enough, though, into the chicane to go for a move, but it's going to happen. He's gonna go for it, I think, soon. As they begin lap 7. By the way, Gabriel Bortoleto is also out of this race. So already 2 retirements, only 18 cars left. There's also Bortoleto and Stroll under investigation for what happened at the start. Bortoleto surely is going to get a grid penalty for the next Grand Prix for that stupid move at the first corner. Isaac Hadjar, by the way, doing a great job. He's kept Oscar Piastri nearly 2 seconds behind him, and Hadjar within a second of sight. So keep your eye on Isaac Hadjar. He's having a great race so far. Looking quick is the Racing Bulls. As Verstappen looks to be a slight bit further ahead of Russell coming into turn 12, the final corner before the back straight, than he was before. Verstappen, though, I don't think had the greatest exit from that corner. But I don't think Russell's going to be close enough to go for a move into the chicane as they come down the boulevard. And yeah, Russell not close enough, but keeping Verstappen right there, keeping him under pressure. As further down the order, Lewis Hamilton is right on the back of Esteban Ocon in the fight for 11th. As we're now on lap 8. Lando Norris in 3rd, still losing time to these two, but he's not losing as much time as he was. I think the gap is now about just over 3.5 seconds between Norris and Verstappen out front, so he's still losing time, but not losing as much as he was a couple laps ago. No further action regarding Piastri and Lawson, which is a good decision. Lawson, yeah, he aggressively bumped Piastri out of the way, but I think, Lawson was fair to go for the move. He was just a bit clumsy in doing it. It was a bit similar to Norris and what he did to Piastri in Singapore. As Verstappen has pulled over a second clear of Russell, crucially. And Verstappen, can he now pull away from Russell, who now will not get the DRS? The Red Bull normally is faster than the Mercedes in a straight line. Russell, though, will pull Max back in a bit in the slipstream. As in the background, Isaac Hadjar right on the back of Carlos Sainz in the battle for 4th. Piastri not getting into that battle at all. So Oscar does not have really any pace at the minute. Piastri is nearly 5 seconds behind his teammate Lando Norris. So Piastri is losing nearly half a second a lap to his teammate, which is really not good. That's quite a poor pace, I must say. Saying that, Charles Leclerc not doing that much better. Leclerc is catching Piastri, but not by as much as probably Ferrari would hope. Leclerc lapping probably a 10th or 2 quicker a lap than Piastri. So he is closing, but again, not by enough, really. Ferrari need to up their pace. As Verstappen now 2.5 clear of Russell. So Max really stretching his legs. So either Mercedes are just backing off to just manage the tyres, and they'll come back later for a bit of a fight. We'll see. Personally, I don't think that's what's happening, because Lando Norris in 3rd is also losing a lot of time to Verstappen. Norris is now, 4.5 seconds behind Verstappen. So Max has turned on the taps and he's pulling away at a vast rate of knots. As Antonelli been noted for moving before the signal, so that's a jump start he's been noted for, so looks like he's probably going to get a penalty. for that. Antonelli, by the way, is in 15th and is in a really bad situation. He's stuck behind Franco Colapinto, and Colapinto is nearly 8 seconds behind Alex Albon, who's trying to overtake Lewis Hamilton here into turn 1. Antonelli is having his race absolutely destroyed by Colapinto. Antonelli is already half a pit stop behind Hulkenberg, who's in 10th. So Antonelli is really in a bad situation as well. Tsunoda is absolutely miles behind already. Tsunoda is what? I think Tsunoda's already half a minute off his teammate. Of course, we had a virtual safety car period, not a full safety car, so wouldn't have close to pack up. But I'm surprised how far Antonelli is already away from the top 10. As Albon has been noted for a start procedure infringement, so possibly starting not in the proper position in his grid slot. We will see what the penalty possibly will be. As the gap out front has come down to 1.2 seconds, so it looks like Russell is getting back after the man who he might be teammates with in a couple years. A driver that he will be fighting, I'm sure, for world championships in the future. As Antonelli has passed Colapinto, but now he's got 8 seconds of clear air in front of him, so he's going to have to push hard to get after the pack ahead. That Mercedes car clearly is quick, so Antonelli, there's a lot of pace in the car. Now he's got to show it. Albon, the car ahead of him, is stuck behind Hamilton, who's stuck behind Ocon, so he should be able to catch those cars relatively quickly. As Verstappen pulling away on this lap. As Leclerc saying, I'm pushing like an animal. I've heard that before. Not from Leclerc, but from Max. Not from Max, but from Fernando Alonso. Leclerc, talking of him, he is pushing like an animal because he's now only a second behind Piastri. Piastri, though, is just about within a second of Hadjar. So we've got a really good fight for 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th brewing up. What Leclerc needs to do is just make sure he gets himself within a second of Piastri, because remember that Ferrari is quicker than the McLaren down the straight by probably a couple tenths of a second. So got to make sure he does that. As further down the order, Lewis Hamilton is right behind Esteban Ocon. As they come down to turn 1, is Hamilton going to go for the move? No, he just didn't get a good enough run through the kink. As Hadjar saying, let's make sure to be aggressive, guys, okay? And what Hadjar is saying on the radio there is, let's make sure we pit sooner rather than later and not leave ourselves out to, hung out to dry. Hadjar, though, has lost a bit of pace in these last couple laps because he was right on the back of Sainz, as now he's got Piastri and Leclerc right on the back of him. So Hadjar dropping off the pace. As Lando Norris, by the way, is starting to close in on George Russell. As all Piastri goes deep at turn 12, locks the brake. And Leclerc now is right in the slipstream. Surely Leclerc will overtake. The Ferrari is faster in a straight line. The DRS opens. Piastri's not got his DRS open for some reason. He should have been within the detection point. But there you go. Leclerc round the outside into the chicane. And Leclerc is up to 6th. That is crucial for Leclerc's race. As we're now on lap 13. Verstappen out front. 2.5 clear of Russell. Lando Norris has just done the fastest lap. Norris is starting to catch the front two ahead of him. So it's all closing up as Hamilton still right behind Ocon, can't go anywhere. As Leclerc now right on the back of Isaac Hadjar. And Leclerc is going to have to wait, probably into the back straight in a few corners' time to pass Hadjar. If he can pass Hadjar, though, as quickly as possible and get after Sainz, then he can get himself away from Piastri, and that will help at least in the battle for fourth. And then we'll see what he can do about getting close to the top three. But Leclerc is definitely going to overtake Hadjar. He's all over the back of him down to turn 12. Hadjar doing a great job. What a season Isaac Hadjar has had. He's always, especially when the midfield is able to fight the front runners, he's always in there, 5th, 6th, 7th. He's always somewhere. As Lewis Hamilton went deep at turn 12, trying to follow Ocon. He's now got Alex Albon right on the back of him. As Leclerc closing on Hadjar down the inside. Late move. And Leclerc gets it done. Obviously, he's done that late move many times before. Famously, brilliantly against Sergio Perez on the final lap a couple years ago. So Leclerc up to 5th. Max Verstappen now does the fastest lap as Alex Albon has overtaken Lewis Hamilton, crucially. But Hamilton has got him back. So that mistake has not cost Hamilton too much. And the reason he got him back is because Albon's pitted, interestingly. Albon on the hard tyre, so not quite sure why he's pitted for mediums, and a bit of a slow stop there. 3.9 seconds. George Russell, just on the radio, just complained that his steering problem has come back. If you don't know what that is, yesterday in qualifying, his steering wheel became heavy all of a sudden. And, yeah, that's clearly what the issue was, and that's why Albon pitted. He tried to pull out the slipstream of Hamilton on the back straight and took off a piece of his front wing. All going off. So Albon is... Where is Albon now? Albon is now last, but he's on the medium tyres now, so see what he can do as Lando Norris continuing to close in on Russell, but not super quickly. As Hadjar still ahead of Piastri as they come through the final corner. Piastri just can't do anything about this Racing Bulls as Leclerc has pulled himself just over a second clear of the Racing Bulls. Leclerc is now 2.5 seconds behind Sainz, who is his next target. Leclerc, though, is already 10 seconds away from third place. That's half a pit stop. So Leclerc's going to have to do something incredible to get anywhere near a podium at this point. As 5-second time penalty for Kimi Antonelli for a jump start. As Albon has pitted again, and I'm going to assume that Albon is retiring from the race, which would be a shame because Albon looked like he was in decent shape before he made that contact with Hamilton. And, well, he's just made a pit stop. It was an 11.3 second stop. And he, I believe, has come out from his pits. So, no idea. Maybe he had a slow puncture or something. As Piastri still into the chicane, stuck behind Hadjar. Albon now on the medium. Not the medium, on the hard compound tyres. So, yeah. Must have had some further damage that needed looking at. As into turn 1, will Piastri send it? No. The braking zone is just not deep enough, not big enough. So we've got a virtual safety car. And that's for debris down the back straight that Albon has left, I'm pretty sure, from the contact with Hamilton. And it looks like actually a bit of the back of Hamilton's car, and it's right on the entry to the chicane. The marshal has run out, pick it up. There's a gap in the traffic, quite a big gap. Obviously, we're still early in the race. As the marshal now sprinting to get back to his post. This virtual safety car, though, I'm not sure it's going to affect the race in terms of people pitting, because I don't think it's going to last much longer. If it was, though, this virtual safety car to last another minute, I think we'd probably get the leaders pitting. Because obviously, if you put under the virtual safety car, saves you pretty much half a pit stop. As didn't look like an obvious jump start there from Antonelli, but it must have been, he must have just about done it. And there you go, virtual safety car is done. As Oscar Piastri sparking like mad, and he's finally got himself ahead of Isaac Hadjar on lap 17. Had to make that move, and he's now up to 6th place. I wonder, will Racing Bulls bring Hadjar in? No, they're not. I mean, there's nothing really they can do, Racing Bulls. They just don't have the pace, really, of the teams ahead of them. So they just need to stay where they are, really, and just hold on. Because 7th for Hadjar would be a pretty good result, given that, again, they don't have the pace of the cars ahead of them, which is the Red Bull, the Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, and the Ferrari. As Fernando Alonso has pitted for a set of hard tyres, so making his one and only pit stop. Alonso will come out in 15th place. So Hulkenberg in 9th is now on the hard tyre. Lando Norris, by the way, just over a second behind Russell. So Norris right on the back of the Mercedes. It's a shame. I do feel sorry for Russell, because clearly his car, he can't drive at a full capacity as Russell pits because of this heavy steering wheel issue. If he could drive the car at full capacity, I'm pretty sure he'd be right there with Verstappen like he was in the early laps. As that is Hulkenberg passing Behrman. Critical move. Hulkenberg now up to 8th place. Remember, Hulkenberg started on the hard tyres. So Russell, he's made his pit stop. Russell should come out ahead of Hulkenberg. And he does. Russell in 7th on the hard compound tyres as Lando Norris has the fastest lap. Max Verstappen is only 3 seconds clear of Norris. Can Lando keep his pace up? He needs to, because he is shortly going to be in undercut range if he can keep this pace up. But McLaren, we know, tend to go longer with their stints. As another pit stop, Oliver Behrman has pitted. Behrman has come up behind Alonso, so he's lost another position. So Behrman now in a net 10th place when he was in 8th. So that pushes Ocon up to 9th. Lewis Hamilton is now 10th. Antonelli 11th. Antonelli, of course, got a 5-second penalty. Antonelli is half a minute off the race leader after 19 laps. Shows you how much time you can lose if you spend too much time behind other cars. But on lap 19, it is Max Verstappen leading by about 3 seconds from Lando Norris. Carlos Sainz in 3rd. doing a great job, Sainz. He's only losing what? He's losing about 0.6 of a second a lap to the leader, which is a pretty good pace. And keeping Leclerc at bay. Leclerc in fourth is only a couple seconds behind, and Leclerc hasn't really caught Sainz, as Norris has another fastest lap of 1:35.5. Be interesting with Carlos Sainz, though, to see what he does in terms of, because we know Williams like to go longer with their first stint, but that's normally when they're in a position of, lower down on the grid. As Antonelli saying, what, how, why have I got a penalty? And they're telling him it's for a jump start, and they say, we don't understand. So presumably, yeah, I looked at the replay. I didn't look at it, super closely, but it didn't jump out, obviously, that he jumped the start. So, yeah, there needs to be a review of that. As we're now on lap 20. By the way, Nib, I've seen you in chat, but yeah, sorry, it's too late. But yeah, sorry. I should have messaged you earlier to try and I don't know, ping your phone or something. But yeah, what do you call it? Lando Norris is still catching Max Verstappen. And, well, he's not catching him super quickly. The gap is down to 2.7 seconds, but still catching. As we're now at lap 20, this is about the point, according to Pirelli, where the proper one-stop pit window should open. As Alex Albon, I think, has just been given a penalty. And he has 5-second time penalty, presumably for hitting the back of Hamilton when he pulled out the slipstream. As Isaac Hadjar is now told to box, and he's just ahead of Russell, who now overtakes him. So Russell up to 6th. So yeah, Hadjar just heading for a standard one-stop race here, where yeah, he's just trying to hold on for 7th place once it all shakes out. And Hadjar now does make that pit stop. As Hadjar now puts on the hard tyre. Decent pit stop. Yep, 2.9. Nothing special by today's standards, which is amazing to say. Given that I was watching a F1 race from 2012, and the pit stops from then were about 3.5, 4 seconds, which at the time were pretty quick, but by today's standards, that's pretty slow. As Albon has been given a reprimand for a starting procedure infringement. So, yeah, that's unusual. Be given a reprimand, but there you go. Hadjar is in 11th after his pit stop, and thankfully for Hadjar, he's got 12 seconds of clear air in front of him, so now he can utilize that and get himself back eventually into 7th place on lap 22. As this is Leclerc, who has finally caught up to the back of Carlos Sainz in the battle for 3rd. Not really, though, a battle for 3rd. It's a battle really for 4th, as Piastri behind in 5th now pits. McLaren Going for the undercut, interestingly, something they, again, don't do very often. As lower down the field, Tsunoda trying to overtake Colapinto. Piastri doesn't come out ahead of Hadjar. Yes, he does, so doesn't have to worry about that. And now Piastri has got to give it absolutely everything. Especially while Sainz is holding up Leclerc. As Verstappen out front is now 4 seconds clear of Lando Norris. So Max he's pulled the gap up to the point where he's safe from an undercut. Meanwhile, Russell now fifth, highest place runner on hard tyres. Of course, Russell has pitted as here comes Charles Leclerc down the back straight. And Sainz defends to the inside. Leclerc tries to do the dummy, but Sainz covers it off as Lando Norris pits. So McLaren not deciding to go longer. They're going to pit before. And it's a good pit stop, 2.5 seconds. And Carlos Sainz also pitting as Leclerc goes through. Russell goes through. Russell, though, pitted a few laps ago, so Norris will have fresher tyres. As that's a pit stop for Carlos Sainz, which was also pretty good. Can he come out ahead of Piastri? He does, but he's on cold tyres. And Piastri on much warmer tyres right up behind him. Piastri has got to get this move done. DRS. As Sainz all moves late, but Piastri up the inside into turn 4. Gets the move done. That's crucial for Oscar Piastri's race. And he's up to what is a net 4th place. So, Carlos Sainz is now in officially 10th place. But like I said, it's a net, I'd probably say 5th. As this is a replay of Tsunoda and Alonso. Alonso going round the outside of Tsunoda. Good move into turn 4. And Alonso then overtaking another car. So Alonso is now up to 12th place. And then it's Colapinto, Tsunoda, Behrman. And then Gasly, Lawson, Albon straggling along at the back. As here is Antonelli on the back of Ocon. Remember, these two cars, Ocon and Antonelli, have not pitted yet. Ocon's still out there on the medium. Antonelli on the hard compound tyre. Antonelli still has a penalty to serve as well. And according to AWS, if Leclerc pits now, Piastri will be a second ahead of him, which is, not a surprise, because Piastri has pitted and is on much fresher tyres. Ferrari going for the long game. As, interestingly, Lando is pitted, but Max Verstappen still has not come in. So, I wonder when they're going to bring Max Verstappen into the pits. But yeah, the, what do you call it? Ocon is not in 6th place. Lewis Hamilton finally has got past Ocon. As Norris saying, you've got to tell me 2 things. Am I doing my race or am I trying to go forwards? And McLaren telling Lando that they just want to make sure they've got better tyres than Max at the end, which seems a bit confusing as Antonelli passes Ocon because they pitted before Verstappen. So, yeah, theoretically, that is not going to happen as Max still has not pitted. As now Charles Leclerc pits. Leclerc will come out, I believe, right behind Carlos Sainz. Will he? It's going to be very close. And I think actually he's going to go up just ahead. But Sainz again is on much warmer tyres. But no, he's not got the momentum. Leclerc will stay ahead. So Leclerc has jumped past Sainz, but lost a position to Piastri. So worked out evenly in the end. So Leclerc now in a net 5th place. As Max Verstappen now told to box, Verstappen does have currently the gap he needs to Russell in second, come out in the lead, as long as the pit stop is all okay. So that will benefit Max at the end of this race. He'll have, 3-4 lap fresher tyres than Norris, and he'll have 7 or 8 lap fresher tyres than Russell, so he doesn't have to worry about George Russell at this point in this race. All about Lando Norris, as that wasn't the quickest pit stop there for Red Bull. And Verstappen, does he come out in the lead? Yes, he does. And Russell is, about 2.5 behind, so it's worked out perfectly for Verstappen and Red Bull, as we're already halfway through this race. Don't go anywhere. This race still has plenty left to be decided. Plenty of racing still to go. Still some cars out there who haven't pitted yet. But currently, it is Max Verstappen leading from Russell second, Norris third, Hülkenberg fourth. Hülkenberg, remember, hasn't pitted yet. He is a factor in this race. Started on the hard tyre, he'll finish the race presumably on the medium. He could be very, very quick at the end of this race. So yes, Hülkenberg fourth, Hamilton fifth. Hamilton hasn't pitted yet. Antonelli sixth. Antonelli has pitted and got his pit stop out of the way. He will have to pit again because the hard tyres, I'm pretty sure, are not going to go to the very end. And Antonelli also has a 5-second penalty to serve. So, yeah. Let me just update that it is Esteban Ocon in 7th, who's on the medium. Ocon doing a good job on a long stint on the medium. As Colapinto has pitted. Colapinto 17th on the medium tyre. So everyone is on the hard compound tyre except for Esteban Ocon, who hasn't pitted yet, and Franco Colapinto, who has pitted. As out front, Max Verstappen, now he's got his tyres warmed up, is starting to pull away from George Russell. Gap now 1.7 seconds. As long as nothing goes wrong with the car, I think Max Verstappen has got this race, I wouldn't say pretty much won, but it's looking very likely that Max Verstappen is going to win this race at this point. Got the freshest tyres out of the top 3. And of course, most importantly, with how close the car performance is between those 3 teams, Max Verstappen is the best driver. And currently, as it stands, Max Verstappen will be 39 points behind Lando Norris going into the final 2 races and sprint that we have after this race. It's not over until the fat lady sings. And Verstappen will keep pushing until the very end. As Oscar Piastri is, I think, very soon going to pass Esteban Ocon for 7th place unless Ocon pits. And Ocon is going to pit, so he finally gets those tyres out of the way. Good stint, though. Ocon is going to be right in that fight for the final point or so at the end of this race, no doubt about it. Let's see where he comes out, though. He will come out behind his teammate. And there you go. He's on fresh, hard tyres. He will come out Ocon as Sonoda pits as well. Ocon comes out behind his teammate in 13th. He's about 4 seconds behind Behrman. That's not bad. Only 4 seconds behind his teammate, and he's on, 10 lap fresher tyres. So, yeah, Ocon, he's got a chance of a point. So Ocon in 13th, and yes, Sonoda, he pitted. So Sonoda is now 16th. Sonoda is on the medium compound tyre now. Sonoda once again having a nothing race, pretty much. And on lap 29, now everyone on the hard tyre except for Sonoda and Colapinto. So let me just update that Piastri is not on the medium, he's on the hard compound tyre. So Verstappen out front, 2.2 seconds clear of Russell. Lando Norris, 3.3 seconds behind Russell. I am a bit surprised that Lando Norris is not catching Russell really at all. Would have expected him to be a bit closer. Hulkenberg in 4th, again, doing a phenomenal job. But he does have Lewis Hamilton within a second of him. We're now seeing that battle as they exit turn 10. Antonelli closing in on the pair as well. As Piastri has got Leclerc a couple seconds behind him. Carlos Sainz still keeping up with Leclerc, just about. He's only just over a second behind. So, as I said coming into the race, Williams, they've got enough pace to be fighting with, the front-running teams. They just haven't got enough to be ahead of them. But they are right in that fight. As here comes Hamilton. Hulkenberg defends. But Hamilton not able to go anywhere. And I don't think Hamilton is going to be able to go for a move into turn 1. Sauber, of course, has the same power unit. As on lap 30, Lewis Hamilton finally pits. That was a good first stint for Hamilton. Where will he come out? He will come out ahead of Esteban Ocon. Will he come out ahead of Oliver Behrman? Let's see. Behrman is within a second of Alonso. He's actually going to come out ahead of Alonso. As Leclerc, his teammate, does the fastest lap, 1:34.9. So Lewis Hamilton comes out in 10th place. So Lewis Hamilton is heading for a points finish. And is now on fresh, medium tyres. And Hamilton is... I think just over 15 seconds behind his teammate. He had a very good first stint there, Lewis Hamilton. Very, very good first stint. And if he can be, quicker than Leclerc now for the rest of the race, he could, Hamilton, finish in the top 7, maybe even top 6. So watch out for Lewis Hamilton. As the Haas locking up into turn 12, nearly hitting the barrier of Oliver Behrman. And he loses ground to Alonso. So we'll see what Hamilton's able to do. As Hulkenberg responds and pits. Hulkenberg, can he cover off Lewis Hamilton? Hamilton has not had a great outlap in terms of lap time. As this is Alonso all over the back of Lewis Hamilton. Like I said, hasn't had a great outlap in terms of lap time, and Alonso now desperately trying to overtake. Hamilton struggling to get those tyres warmed up. And Hulkenberg has come out 4 seconds ahead. So I think Hamilton's made a mistake somewhere, because Hülkenberg was wheel to wheel with Hamilton right before they pitted. So Hamilton costing himself 3 or 4 seconds, which could be crucial at the end of this race. So Hülkenberg now 9th on the medium tyre. What a race Hülkenberg is having. Hülkenberg is now 7.5 seconds behind Hadjar. Hülkenberg could finish in the top 7 if he really gets the best out of those medium tyres. So we will see what he can do. But yeah, Hülkenberg is having a really good race. As Hamilton trying to pull away from Alonso. He's pulled away a bit, but Alonso still just about keeping up with him. Alonso, I think, still receiving some DRS. Behrman, though, closing very quickly and dives to the inside of Alonso. Oliver Behrman up to 11th place. And if Antonelli does pit again, that's a net 10th place for Oliver Behrman on lap 32. Less than 20 laps to go in this Las Vegas Grand Prix. As out front, Verstappen, 3.5 seconds clear of Russell. Lando Norris, though, really starting to catch Russell. He's only 1.5 seconds behind. Fresher tyres, faster car. Surely Lando Norris is going to finish in second. And these extra 3 points could be the difference between him clinching the championship in Qatar or not, and having to wait possibly until Abu Dhabi. As Esteban Ocon is now right on the back of that fight with Behrman and Alonso. So Ocon now has got his tyres fired up. As lap 33, Russell starting to come under some serious pressure. As Ocon right in the slipstream of Alonso. Of course, ex-teammate Alonso. I'm sure he'll love to overtake him if he can. Down the back straight. And Alonso is not even defending. Ocon gets the move done and is up to 12th place. As Liam Lawson, by the way, has pitted. And Alex Albon somehow has got himself up to 16th place, even though he's made a couple pit stops from early on. As Russell saying, I know Norris will be quick. I'll do what I can to defend from him. But yeah, I think he's clearly struggling with a car issue. And basically saying on the radio, I'll do what I can to defend, but I'm not going to risk my race. As in, I'm not going to throw away a podium. A podium would be a good result still for Mercedes. Whether they could have won today, if the steering wheel was working properly for Russell, who knows. But if he could still bring it home in third, that would still be something. But Lando Norris is now within a second as they begin lap 34. As Norris asking, you want me in DRS or try to overtake? As McLaren saying, please overtake him. We are trying to go after Max, which is ambitious, given that Max is about 5 seconds clear of Norris. But if they want any chance at winning this race, Lando Norris is going to have to overtake Russell on this lap, which looks like it's going to happen. Russell struggling with the car. By the way, lower down the order, Charles Leclerc starting to catch Piastri now. Gap about 1.3 seconds. That's a battle to look out for. Remember, Leclerc has, I think, fresher tyres than Piastri. Here comes Lando Norris, though. Russell, try as he might, can't do anything to stop Lando Norris up to second. And surely, at this point, the champion-elect will pull away from Russell. And if he can catch Verstappen, then that would be great. But he doesn't need to. Because as it stands, he will extend his championship lead to his nearest rival, Oscar Piastri, to 32 points. That would be very healthy going into the next Grand Prix, where he could potentially win it. Remember, he cannot win the championship this Grand Prix. The earliest he can win it is next week in Qatar, so he's got to set himself up to win it next week. And second would still be good enough. I do wonder, though, with George Russell, how he's going to do between now and the end of the race, because looking at the top 10, he is one of the slowest, I think, currently in the top, say, 7 or 8. So he needs to keep up the pace. He can't afford to just drop off the pace to bring the car home, because he doesn't want to throw away a podium. He's got his teammate, thankfully, in 4th place, but even his teammates catching him, and Antonelli has got much older tyres, as Alex Albon is pitted again. And let me just update that we are now on lap 36. And let me update that Sonoda and Colapinto down the bottom are on the mediums. And then you've got Lawson on the hard tyre. And Albon, I don't know what tyre he's on. I'm assuming he'll be on a medium tyre, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. At least for Williams, though, they are heading for a few points, which will pretty much secure 5th in the championship. The first top 5 finish for the championship for Williams since 2017, 8 years ago. It's been a long road back to a top 5 finishing position, but they've got it pretty much, and next year they could be very much one of the strongest teams. Albon, has come out on the medium. As this is Oscar Piastri now right behind Antonelli, and in his fight with Leclerc, Piastri has got to overtake Antonelli as quickly as possible. If he gets held up for too long, Leclerc's going to be right on his back like he was earlier. And he doesn't want that, because Leclerc is on a mission. As Max Verstappen does a fastest lap, 1:34.2, and pulls away from Norris. Norris nearly 6 seconds behind. And I think that, at this point, has pretty much ended the battle for the win. Max Verstappen, no way is he being caught by Lando Norris. As Alex Albon has pitted again, and they are retiring the car. So that is the 3rd retirement from the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Piastri continues to close in. As Nib in the chat is just saying, Albon apparently went the whole race without team radio. So that massively, obviously, hurt his cause. You desperately need team radio in today's F1 because obviously there's so much information that the driver doesn't have access to. And I think Albon pitted to serve his penalty before he retired just there. So, yeah. But Albon, yeah, has had a really poor last few races. Hasn't scored a point since, I think, Monza, where he really brilliantly finished in, I think, 7th place. Since then, he has been pretty poor. Carlos Sainz has become the Carlos Sainz we were all expecting him to be this season. Is it an omen for next season? Will Carlos Sainz be one of the star drivers next year? We'll have to see. As Piastri now really on the back of Antonelli. I'm not sure how much longer Antonelli can keep Piastri back, but thankfully, from Ferrari's point of view, Leclerc is now within a second of Piastri, so Leclerc might be able to pull himself along if Piastri can get past. I think Mercedes are trying to take Antonelli to the end of the race on this set of hard tyres, which, quite frankly, a set of hard tyres should not go basically the whole race, but that's Pirelli for you. As Oscar Piastri tries to go around the outside, but Antonelli holds the inside line. Piastri, big slide coming out of the chicane. That puts Leclerc right on his tail. Will Leclerc go for a move at turn 1 on lap 39? He's right in the slipstream, but I don't think he's close enough. No, but he's right with him now. This is Leclerc's chance. If he wants 4th place in this race, then he has to get past Piastri whilst Piastri is being held up. As they come through the middle sector. Interestingly, and just proving that Russell clearly has car issues, Antonelli lapping at about the same pace as Russell, even though Russell is on, like 15 lap fresher tyres. So Antonelli is helping his teammate out quite a bit, because if Piastri and Leclerc were to overtake now and keep pushing, Russell potentially could be under pressure quite a bit at the very end of this race for that final podium position. As they come down the back straight, Piastri nowhere near as close on this occasion, though. On now lap 40. Down the order, Esteban Ocon is now ahead of Oliver Behrman, so Ocon up to 11th. 3 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton is Ocon. This is probably Esteban Ocon's best race in a long time. Quite a few races. Outqualified Behrman and outracing him as well. Let's give credit where credit's due. As Alonso, whose race really has fell apart after being in the top 10 earlier, is currently 13th, but he's sticking right with Behrman. And yeah, Leclerc looking closer to Piastri than Piastri is to Antonelli. And he is closer to Piastri by about a tenth and a half. And he just needs to keep up with Piastri and hope that Piastri goes wheel to wheel with Antonelli again, so he can maybe sneak his way through. And on lap 41, Liam Lawson, who obviously had that contact early with Piastri. Now to 16th place. What could have been for Liam Lawson? Hadjar up there in 8th, comfortably in 8th. Lawson could have been right there as well. So, couple extra points left on the table. Lawson did not have to be as aggressive as he was on the first corner, but that's the way it ended up. It's down to turn 4. Piastri now looks like he's potentially going to have another go at Antonelli soon. And Piastri needs these extra couple points. If he finishes 4th, Piastri, and Norris finishes 2nd, then that'll be a loss of 6 points, which would put the gap up to 30 points. For those, couple extra points gained here for Piastri, if he has a better weekend in Qatar, which, he's been better around that track, that Qatar track, than he's ever been here. So, it's possible. Then it gives him, a decent chance of maybe keeping the fight going until the final race. As Antonelli moving out to try and break the slipstream. By the way, shout out again to Carlos Sainz. Only 3.5 seconds behind Leclerc. And still just about keeping up with this trio. And once again, Williams proving to have a pretty quick race car. Antonelli, by the way, is clearly catching George Russell. He took a couple seconds out of Russell in the last 2 or 3 laps. And this is why he has to, Antonelli, keep ahead of Piastri and Leclerc. Because if Piastri or Leclerc get ahead and keep pushing, they'll be right on Russell's tail at the end, because Russell is miles off the pace on older tyres and with a bit of a wonky steering wheel. Russell is, 14 seconds off the lead. It's down to turn 12. Leclerc a lot closer on this occasion to Piastri. Gets a good exit as well. And he's right in the slipstream. But can he? Does that Ferrari have enough straight line speed? I don't think it does. Because Piastri has also got DRS, but has got enough of a toe to pull himself along. Another impressive thing, by the way, about Carlos Sainz is he's lapping at about the same pace as these three, Antonelli, Piastri, and Leclerc. And Sainz doesn't have DRS. So, if Sainz had DRS, I think Carlos would be just as quick, if not, quicker than Antonelli, and be right in this. Sainz, I think, actually on that lap was a couple tenths of a second quicker. So Sainz might actually catch up with these pack of cars before the end. As further down the order, Nico Hülkenberg is slowly catching Isaac Hadjar, but he's 6.5 seconds behind. I'd be surprised if Hülkenberg was able to catch and pass Hadjar before the end. The hard tyres proving to be very good around this circuit. And yeah, Lewis Hamilton in 10th. Hamilton heading for just a very solid 10th place finish, which, decent result, decent drive. As, once again, on the exit turn 12, Piastri within a second of Antonelli, but not close enough. Leclerc still closer to Piastri than Piastri is to Antonelli. On lap 44, we've got about, 6-7 laps to go. Remember, though, Antonelli has a 5-second penalty still to serve. So, as it stands, if he drops 5 seconds, he will finish, I believe, just behind Carlos Sainz, which I think is why Sainz is still pushing, because he wants to keep under 5 seconds to Antonelli. And if he does, Carlos Sainz will finish 6th, which would be a good result, very good result for him and Williams. So really for Piastri, because of that penalty for Antonelli, as long as Oscar keeps Leclerc behind him, then he's got 4th place secured. But the thing is if he passes Antonelli and keeps pushing, he could get after Russell, who's very slow. Piastri, though, has lost the DRS. And now Leclerc, with the DRS, is going to be right on his tail, I'm pretty sure. Has Piastri got the DRS? He has. He kept just inside a second. It was really close. I thought he'd fallen just outside, but no. As lower down the order, Yuki Tsunoda is trying to overtake his good friend Pierre Gasly for 14th place. Shame that Gasly got turned around at the first corner. Had a great qualifying, but Bortoleto ruined that pretty quickly. As into turn 4, Piastri still not really close to Antonelli. Getting to the point where Antonelli looks like he's going to pull over a second clear, and has now pulled over a second clear of Piastri. Piastri cannot afford to let that happen, and he has. It's up to 1.1. Leclerc is going to he's going to have the DRS on Piastri, and Piastri won't have any DRS, so now Piastri is going to come under massive threat from Leclerc in these next couple laps. Leclerc gets a good exit from turn 12, and now, on the back straight, Leclerc will close in. And closes the gap to about half a second or so. But the longer Piastri goes without that DRS, Leclerc is going to eventually, I think, have a go at Piastri. Leclerc trying his best to hang on as he drops a bit further behind in the dirty air through turn 1, 2, and 3. Got the DRS again, though, down to turn 4. Carlos Sainz in the background, still keeping about 3.5 to 4 seconds behind. And yeah, Piastri has lost the DRS. Antonelli now 1.2 seconds ahead. So it's all down to Charles Leclerc and whether he can have another go at Oscar Piastri between now and the end of this race, as they are still catching Russell. Russell only 5.5 seconds clear of Antonelli. We've still got another 4 laps. So Russell is just trying to bring it home to the end, but you might have a pack of cars right on the back of him at the end. Leclerc, unfortunately, just can't get close enough now to Piastri. It seems as though these cars, their front tyres, I think, have had it at this point. Out front, Max Verstappen, almost 8 seconds clear of Norris. What a performance from Max Verstappen. Got squeezed at the start. Norris went deep, made his mistake, and Max just cut underneath, took the lead, and hasn't looked back. And he will take another race win in 2025. He could very well end up with the most race wins for 2025 and not win the championship. Very rare that happens, where you win the most races in a season and don't win the championship, but it could happen. And very likely, this will be the first year since 2020 where Max Verstappen is not world champion. Unless a miracle turnaround happens in these final couple weeks of the season. It's happened before. Will it happen again? Max is at least doing enough to keep it going for himself until Qatar, but whether he will still have a chance going into Abu Dhabi is a complete different story. As Verstappen, by the way, on that lap was like 2 seconds quicker than Lando Norris. I don't know if Norris has got an issue, but Lando Norris is losing a lot of lap time. So maybe he's just backed off massively. As we're entering now the final 2.5 laps. As Leclerc is dropped to 1.7 seconds behind. So yeah, Leclerc's front tyres have had it. Piastri's trying to keep up with Antonelli, but he can't. Got to say, even though he's going to get a 5-second penalty, what a performance from Kimi Antonelli. 17th on the grid. And he's going to finish only a couple seconds behind his teammate. Yes, his teammate's got an issue, but still. What a performance. If only he had made Q3, I think Antonelli would have been right in the fight for the podium. And who knows, might have been fighting for the win today. Because the Mercedes car was a lot quicker in the early part of the race when they didn't have that issue with the steering. As, yeah, Max being told on the radio that Lando is nursing some kind of issue because, yeah, he's dropped another couple seconds. He should finish second, Lando. He's still got 9 seconds between him and Russell. As we're now on the penultimate lap of this Las Vegas Grand Prix. By the way, guys, make sure to stick around. What do you call it? Make sure to stick around until just after the race, because I want to hear from you guys as to who do you think is driver of the day. For me, driver of the day is, I think it has to be Kimi Antonelli. Not just because he's made the most positions, but the pace he's had. Very, very impressive. And he's going to end up finishing in 6th place because Carlos Sainz has dropped over 5 seconds, well over 5 seconds behind. So he will finish in the top 6, Antonelli, who continues to have an impressive final few races of the season. Building momentum for next season. You never know. He could be a world championship contender next season, especially if that Mercedes car is as quick as they hope it will be. And you never know, he could be world champion next season. As Max Verstappen starts the final tour of the Las Vegas Strip. As Norris in second continues to drop time, but he will finish second. Russell has closed the gap to Norris, but yeah, Norris should get to the end in second place. But Max Verstappen has yet again been brilliant this weekend. Second in qualifying in very difficult wet conditions. Put himself right in the mix for the race win. Got the lead at the start, and like I said earlier, never looked back. And mathematically, with this win, he can still win the Drivers' World Championship. If he does win it from this point, it will be his greatest achievement yet. But at least he's giving himself even longer to possibly complete what would be a miracle comeback. As Antonelli, by the way, I think is over 5 seconds clear of Leclerc now, so Antonelli's going to finish in 5th. As here comes Max Verstappen through the final corner, and for the second time, wins in Las Vegas. Brilliant race win. Lando Norris will come home second, and will come home about 3 seconds or so ahead of George Russell. And yeah, Norris, I think it's something with a ride height or something, because it's very bumpy, that McLaren, by the looks of it. But he comes home second. Crucial result. Norris, surely, at this point, you must say, has one hand on the championship trophy. Russell finishes 3rd. Piastri finishes 4th. And Antonelli does finish in 5th. What a drive from the young Italian. 5th. In the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Leclerc 6th, Sainz 7th, Hadjar 8th. Brilliant drive from him. Brilliant from Hulkenberg 9th, and Lewis Hamilton, shout out to him in 10th. And the rest of the field, Ocon, Behrman, Alonso, Gasly, Tsunoda, Lawson, Colapinto. And your only retirements, Albon, Bortoletto, and Stroll. But yeah, let me just set up the poll quickly. Asking you guys, who is your driver of the day? Again, my driver of the day is Antonelli. That was a very, very impressive performance. So let me just get this poll set up. So the driver of the day options will be Verstappen, Antonelli, Lewis Hamilton, and the other option I'm going to put Carlos Sainz in there. I think he deserves a shout out. So there you go. Who is your driver of the day for the Las Vegas Grand Prix? So they're saying Lando had a fuel issue. It was low on fuel. Thankfully for him, he got to the end. I think it was like 3 seconds or so clear of Russell. And picked up the points. Yeah, so Lando Norris finishing second. Piastri 4th. Verstappen obviously won the race. So Lando Norris is 30 points clear of Piastri, his closest rival in the championship, going into the Qatar Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is 42 points behind. Meaning that, and let me just quickly do a quick bit of research just to make sure I'm correct on this. So, Oscar Piastri has to outscore Lando Norris by 5 points or more over the Qatar Grand Prix weekend to force the championship battle to the final race. And for Max Verstappen, the only way Max Verstappen will have a chance at the championship in the final race is if Max outscores Norris by 17 points and also wins the race. So if Max, let's say Max wins the sprint and Norris finishes second, that's 1 point he's outscored Lando by. And then let's say Max wins the Qatar Grand Prix and Lando Norris finishes in 6th. Then Max just about will force the championship fight to go to the final race. But again, very likely Verstappen's championship challenge will end next week in Qatar. For Piastri, like I said, he needs to outscore Norris by 5 points in Qatar. If he doesn't, if the championship lead is 25 points or more, and Lando Norris has more race wins than Piastri coming out of the Qatar Grand Prix, I believe, then Norris will be world champion. So there you go. Most likely, I think Norris will win the championship in Qatar. The McLaren will be very quick. Lando has been pretty quick around that circuit in the last couple years. Let me just read a couple comments from the chat. Before we head off, Lewis Hamilton says, I think he needs to be happy with that. However, given he knows had he qualified better, he would have been around where his teammate is. Hamilton did have a very good race. I don't think you can really complain with how Lewis did today. He finished about half a minute behind his teammate. So if he had qualified around where his teammate qualified, which was what, 9th, then Lewis today probably would have finished, what, 8th? And probably would have been a few seconds behind his teammate. So it's not like he would have been on for a much better result. But yeah, he did the best he could, given that he started 19th. Looney Classic says, I still think Lewis will be better under the new regs next year. I think these current regs have worked against his driving style. We'll see. Brace for a very boring season next year, possibly. It could be. We could be, having one team and one driver dominating next year. Very much possible, but I don't quite think that will happen, because I think either one of two things will happen. Mercedes either will have the strongest power unit, but that will mean then that we'll have the works Mercedes team and McLaren. Those two teams fighting for the championship. Maybe Williams as well, grabbing the odd race win. But if Mercedes don't have the power from the engine that we expect, then we'll have a surprise, maybe world champion next season. Maybe, maybe Aston Martin will have the fastest car next year, or Audi, or someone. I don't think we're in for a Mercedes 2014 type situation. The field will spread out, unfortunately, in terms of lap time. It will spread out quite a bit compared to what it is like now. That's just reality. When you get a regulation change, the field spreads out. But I don't think it means that we're in for necessarily a boring season. I think honestly, it's quite unlikely that next season is going to be just a boring season where one team or driver dominates. I think it's pretty likely we will get a competitive championship battle between 2 or 3 different drivers. Astra says, imagine if Lando gets disqualified now for insufficient fuel sample. Would be quite dramatic, but I think because he did get around, and I don't think he stopped on track, so I don't think, unfortunately for you Piastri fans, I don't think that's a possibility. Dane says Alonso fans are going to be fuming about Aston Martin strategy costing him at least 9th or 10th. Yeah, I don't think really that's why Alonso finished 13th. I just don't think the Aston Martin was quick enough. I mean, I said it in my qualifying preview. I didn't think Aston Martin had top 10 pace. Alonso was only really in the top 10 because of the weather conditions yesterday. The Aston Martin just wasn't a top 10 car this weekend. So, yeah. I think Alonso probably will be a bit better off in Qatar. I think Aston Martin probably will be a bit stronger there. But I don't think Aston Martin, to be honest, give a fuck where they are in the final couple races. They are 100% focused on next year now. And I know they're very excited for, this new era where for them, they've got so much potential. New wind tunnel, Adrian Newey designing the car, Honda power units. Who knows where they'll be? So, let me finish up the poll in the chat. Only 45 votes, but a very clear winner from those 45 votes. 84% of the vote has gone to Max Verstappen. He did drive brilliantly today, no doubt about it. I still think, though, Antonelli was the driver of the day. And then 7% joined Antonelli and Hamilton. And then on 2%, Carlos Sainz. So there you go. That is the Las Vegas Grand Prix of 2025. Qualifying was the highlight in the end. The race it wasn't bad. We had some good battles here and there. It just wasn't quite as exciting as I think it had the potential to be. If Russell didn't have his issues, I think we could have had a really good battle between Mercedes and Red Bull there for the win. As it was really brewing up to be something good in those early laps. But in the end, we got what we got. So yeah, that's that's what we got in the end. Probably the most boring, you could say, Las Vegas Grand Prix we've had so far, but I wouldn't say it was a bad race. I wouldn't go that far. But yeah, cheers for you guys joining me, of course, for the content this weekend. Despite, obviously, the bad time for us, a lot of us, obviously, in Europe. Just a reminder, I will tomorrow be doing, as usual, my podcast reviewing the Las Vegas Grand Prix. And then next weekend, make sure to join me for the penultimate race of 2025, the Qatar Grand Prix, where we will be live for both qualifying and the race. I'll be live at 4:30 p.m. UK time for qualifying. Qualifying starting an hour and a half after that. Obviously, we'll go to the session and all that. And then next Sunday, I will be live 2 hours before lights out at 2 p.m. UK time for the race watch along for the Qatar Grand Prix. Make sure to join us for what is likely to be the race where the world champion is crowned for 2025. And then, of course, if you can't join us for the watch-alongs, there will still be a podcast the day after that Grand Prix next Monday to cover whatever has happened in that Grand Prix. Yeah, obviously a shame that Nib wasn't able to join us, which I'm sure he's a bit pissed off about. I'm sure, though, he will join us at least one final time before the end of the season, because, of course, we've still got the final race in Abu Dhabi in a couple weeks' time, which is, I think, a decent time for him. Not sure what the time's like for the Qatar Grand Prix for him, but I know Abu Dhabi's a bit better. So, yeah, hopefully we'll have him on one final time before the end of the season. But, yeah, Las Vegas Grand Prix done with, and only 2 races to go. Feels sad that we've only got a couple of races to go, but this season has been obviously long, and it is time for the season to come to a close in these final couple weeks. So like I said, that's the content for the next week or so. Make sure to join us for the Qatar Grand Prix. Again, the Grand Prix that is very likely going to crown the world champion of 2025. And yeah, hope you guys can join us for that. Make sure to subscribe before you go for more content like this. Make sure to smash a like button as well. And until my podcast tomorrow, reviewing what's happened this weekend in Las Vegas, and until the penultimate race in Qatar, in the desert, where we will quite possibly crown a brand new world champion, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.